You've been too hard on yourself for too long. They told you that to be good enough, you had to hustle more, fix yourself, stop feeling so much. They told you that peace comes from being perfect. But if that were true, why do you still feel tired even after doing everything right? Why do you still carry that quiet heaviness, that ache to finally feel okay just being you? The truth is, you don't need to become someone else to find peace. You need to remember who you were before the world convinced you to be so hard on yourself. And Buddhism holds the way back, a gentle path of compassion, presence, and acceptance that doesn't ask you to fight yourself, but to finally stop fighting at all. For over 2,500 years, these teachings have helped people like you sit with pain without collapsing under it, to breathe through anxiety instead of drowning in it, to speak to themselves not with shame but with kindness, not by escaping life, but by meeting it fully with a quiet strength that feels like coming home. Tonight, as you listen, something inside you will soften. The tightness in your chest will ease. The noise in your mind will slow. And a deep truth will begin to rise, that you are already worthy of love, especially from yourself. This isn't just a sleep story. It's a return to yourself. Are you ready? Let's begin. Before we begin, take a slow breath. Let yourself feel how tired you are of rushing, of pretending, of carrying more than your share. That quiet ache inside of you, the one that says, "I just want to feel peace." Tonight, we answer it. Not by fixing you, not by pushing harder, but by returning to something your soul already knows, the strength of gentleness. Let's begin with the Buddhist path of Kshanti, a word that doesn't shout but changes everything. Kshanti means forbearance, patience, but not the kind that waits angrily, tapping its foot and clenching its jaw. No. This is the kind that sits in silence and lets the storm pass through, not because you're weak, but because you've realized fighting the rain doesn't make it stop. Kshanti is the inner permission to say, "I am uncomfortable, and that's okay for now." It's one of the 6 perfections in Mahayana Buddhism, which means it's not a small side note on the path. It's essential. It's what makes everything else possible. You've probably been taught your whole life to push discomfort away. We're told to distract it, bury it, drink it down, or work twice as hard to outrun it. But Buddhism offers something radical. What if the very thing you're trying to avoid is the place where healing begins? Kshanti starts in that quiet moment where something hurts, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and instead of panicking, you stay. Not frozen, not passive, but aware, open, present. You begin to see discomfort not as punishment or failure, but as part of life, part of growth, part of what it means to be human. And here's the truth. Every time you meet discomfort with patience instead of judgment, you're being kind to yourself in the deepest way. You're saying, "I trust myself to feel this. I don't have to lash out. I don't have to collapse. I can simply be here, even if it's hard." That's self-compassion in action. Modern psychology echoes this. Research shows that people who are more accepting of their painful thoughts and emotions suffer less from anxiety and depression. Not because they feel less pain, but because they're not adding a second layer of shame on top. Kshanti does exactly this. It teaches you to stop making yourself wrong for being in pain. Let's take a deeper look at how this actually plays out in your life. When you're criticized, whether by someone else or your own mind, what do you normally do? Do you fight back? Collapse into guilt? Do you rehearse what you should have said for hours in your head? Kshanti offers a third way. It teaches you to pause and soften into the moment, not to agree with the criticism, but to feel what's really there. The sting, the vulnerability, maybe even the fear of being unworthy, and then to hold it with gentleness, like a parent holding a crying child. You don't scold the child, you don't rush them, you stay, you breathe, and something settles. This is where forbearance becomes more than tolerance. Tolerance says, "I'll get through this." Forbearance says, "I will meet this moment with wisdom and care, even if I'm shaking." One is survival, the other is spiritual strength. Kshanti also reshapes how you relate to the past. So many of us are trapped in regret, haunted by what we should have done differently. But the practice of forbearance allows you to sit with those regrets without flinching. It tells you, yes, you made choices you wouldn't make now, but punishing yourself forever won't change them. What matters is how you meet yourself now. Kshanti doesn't erase the past. It simply stops letting it define your worth. And that shift, letting go of self-punishment, is powerful. Because the truth is, shame never made anyone better. It only makes you smaller. But forbearance says, you are not your worst day. You are not your worst decision. You are the one who is still showing up, still learning, still trying to love. Even your body feels this. When you start practicing patience with discomfort, your nervous system begins to calm. Your breath slows. Your muscles soften. You send signals to your whole being that say, we're safe now. That safety becomes the soil where healing grows. And yet, this isn't about becoming numb. Kshanti isn't detachment. It's aliveness. It's full presence with the hard stuff, without needing to escape. When your sadness rises like a wave, you let it rise. You don't label it. You don't ask it to leave. You simply notice, breathe, and trust that it won't last forever, because nothing does. The Buddha himself showed this over and over. Even when insulted or misunderstood, he never reacted with anger. Not because he didn't feel, but because he had trained in forbearance. He understood that other people's behavior doesn't have to dictate your peace, that your inner stillness is your responsibility. And that's what Kshanti gives you, the ability to hold on to your calm, even when the world around you isn't calm at all. Think about how powerful that is in everyday life. You're in traffic, someone cuts you off, your heart starts racing. You can grip the wheel tighter, or you can breathe. You can say, yes, this is uncomfortable. Yes, I feel angry, and that's okay. The moment you stop fighting the discomfort, something shifts. You're no longer a prisoner of your emotion. You're the one witnessing it, holding it, letting it pass. That doesn't mean you become passive or let people walk all over you. True forbearance includes boundaries, but they come from clarity, not reactivity, from knowing your worth so deeply that you don't need to explode to protect it. You simply honor it, quietly and firmly. There's also a deep humility in Kshanti. It asks you to let go of needing life to go your way. That doesn't mean giving up your goals. It means releasing the illusion that comfort is a right or a reward. Instead, you begin to see discomfort as a teacher. Each moment of difficulty becomes an invitation to meet yourself with more honesty and care, and it changes how you see others too. When you become more patient with your own discomfort, you naturally become more patient with theirs. You stop needing people to act perfectly. You give them space to be human, just as you've given it to yourself. That's how forbearance becomes a bridge, not just to inner peace, but to deeper connection. Because what we all really want underneath it all is to be met with kindness when we're struggling, to not have to perform our way into love. Kshanti gives you the power to offer that first, to yourself and to others. You may be wondering now, how do I actually practice this? Start small. The next time you notice yourself feeling restless, irritated, ashamed, pause. Instead of reacting, label it gently. Discomfort is here. Not I'm broken, not I need to fix this. Just this is part of being human. Then breathe into it. Let the sensation rise and fall without clinging or pushing it away. Watch your mind try to solve it and let it soften. Your only job is to stay present. Compassionate, curious. Over time, you'll notice something remarkable. The things that used to unravel you begin to lose their power, not because they stopped happening, but because you stopped leaving yourself when they did. And that's the core of this practice, staying close to yourself. Even when you're messy, even when you're hurting, especially then. There will be moments when you forget, when you react instead of respond. That's okay. Kshanti includes patience with your own progress. You're not failing, you're learning. And each return to gentleness rewires the way you relate to pain. Some days, your patience will feel deep and endless. Other days, it'll feel like a tiny flicker in a storm. But flickers matter. They light the way forward. There's a Zen saying, the obstacle is the path. Kshanti teaches you to stop cursing the obstacle and start listening to it. What is it showing you about your limits, your wounds, your strength? What does it need from you? Not to go away, but to feel held. That's the quiet revolution this practice offers. No drama, no performance, just presence. And from that presence, a self-compassion so steady it becomes your new home. You begin to realize peace was never about controlling life. It was about staying kind in the middle of it. And you're doing that now, breath by breath, moment by moment. That's Kshanti, not a grand gesture, not a perfect posture, but the willingness to sit with discomfort and not abandon yourself. Keep going. The gentleness you're learning now will carry you through more than you can imagine. And this is just the beginning. So much of your suffering hasn't come from what happened to you, but from the way you blamed yourself for how you carried it. You've been taught to believe that being hard on yourself is the path to improvement. That guilt is proof you care. That pressure is the only way you'll change. But if shame really worked, you'd be healed by now. What if there's another way to grow? One that doesn't hurt you in the process? What if discipline could feel like kindness and effort didn't have to feel like war? That's where we go now, into the middle way. Buddhism speaks of the middle path as the heart of the Buddha's realization. After years of extreme asceticism, starving his body, rejecting pleasure, and nearly dying in the name of spiritual purity, the Buddha discovered something simple but profound. Neither self-indulgence nor self-punishment leads to freedom. Both are traps. One keeps you numb, the other keeps you in pain, and neither allows you to actually wake up. The middle way isn't about balance for the sake of balance. It's about liberation. It's the art of choosing what nourishes you, not what flatters your ego or feeds your wounds. It teaches that real discipline doesn't come from fear, it comes from love. This path doesn't reject effort. It honors it. But it asks a powerful question. What kind of effort? The kind that pushes from lack, or the kind that flows from clarity? Self-discipline without self-punishment begins with understanding your intention. Most people chase improvement because they think they aren't enough. They diet because they hate their body. They meditate to fix their broken mind. They strive for success to prove their worth. But when discipline comes from that place, it becomes a cycle of rejection. You try to change yourself out of fear, and even if you succeed, the fear stays. The middle way cuts through this. It says, you are already worthy. You practice not to become acceptable, but because you already are. That shift changes everything. You no longer use discipline to erase yourself. You use it to support yourself. You don't skip dessert because you're disgusting. You skip it because your body feels better with less sugar. Not punishment, wisdom. This path also frees you from the illusion that more is always better. More hours at work, more spiritual practices, more goals. The middle way is the reminder that growth isn't measured in how much you can endure, but in how well you can listen to your needs, your energy, your truth. It's not about avoiding all discomfort. It's about not creating unnecessary suffering in the name of progress. And it's subtle. That's why it takes real awareness. You might think you're being disciplined when you work until 2 a.m. every night, but if your body is breaking down, that's not discipline, it's disconnection. You might think you're being spiritual by denying all pleasure, but if your joy is drying up, that's not virtue, it's fear in disguise. The Buddha taught that even right effort can become craving when it's driven by the desire to control or impress. That's why he always returned to mindfulness, noticing your inner state with honesty. Self-awareness is not just noticing your habits, it's noticing why you have them and whether they are serving your freedom or feeding your suffering. One way to tell the difference is how you feel after the effort. Are you more grounded, more alive, more at peace? Or do you feel more tense, more drained, more ashamed? Discipline aligned with the middle way leaves you clearer, not more confused. It creates energy. It doesn't steal it. It also includes rest. Rest isn't laziness here. It's wisdom. You rest because your energy matters. You pause not to escape, but to stay connected to your real pace. In fact, one of the most radical acts of discipline is to say no to overdoing, especially when your old identity was built on proving your worth through burnout. And when you fail, because you will, you don't respond with punishment. You respond with curiosity. The middle path invites you to ask, what did I need in that moment? Instead of, what's wrong with me? That question opens the door to understanding, to self-trust. Over time, this builds a relationship with yourself based on care, not control. This kind of discipline also helps you recognize that not every impulse deserves your obedience. There's wisdom in restraint, but only when it's rooted in respect, not shame. The middle way teaches you how to pause between feeling and reaction. When you're angry, for instance, it doesn't mean you suppress it. It means you feel it fully and choose a response that aligns with your values. That pause is where your freedom lives. Over time, you learn to recognize the difference between your wise inner voice and the punishing one. One says, "Let's do this because it supports who you're becoming." The other says, "You have to do this or you're a failure." They may both push you toward the same action, but one strengthens you, the other wears you down. This is why mindfulness is so central in the Buddhist path. Without it, your discipline turns into autopilot. You follow rules without knowing why. You punish yourself for not living up to an image that was never real. But with mindfulness, you can notice when you're slipping into extremes and gently return. You'll also begin to see that true freedom isn't about doing whatever you want, whenever you want. That's just another prison disguised as pleasure. The middle path honors desire, but doesn't bow to it. It acknowledges cravings without letting them rule. It trusts you to choose what aligns with your deeper peace, not just your passing urges. And this is where self-respect is born, not from control, but from clarity. You stop needing external rules to tell you how to live. You start knowing from the inside out what actually brings you into harmony. You begin to understand that growth isn't linear, it's spiral. Some days you'll feel strong, others you'll feel like you're back at the beginning. The middle way doesn't judge that. It expects it. It teaches you to meet every stage of your journey with patience, with humility, with a steady commitment to stay in relationship with yourself. And this includes your practice, whatever that looks like. Whether it's meditation, journaling, movement, or something else entirely, the middle path reminds you that how you relate to your practice is the practice. If you sit every morning but hate yourself the whole time, that's not spiritual progress. If you miss a day and spiral into guilt, that's not awareness. It's attachment to an identity. Let it go. Begin again. The middle way also protects you from the danger of extremes when it comes to identity. Sometimes we cling so tightly to being the disciplined one that we lose flexibility. We force ourselves to keep up routines that no longer serve us. But discipline that can't adapt isn't strength, it's fear dressed up in willpower. This path is alive, it's responsive, and it teaches you to trust that sometimes letting go is the discipline, not quitting, but allowing. Letting things breathe, making room for change. Even your goals begin to shift. Instead of striving to prove or outperform, you begin to align with what feels deeply meaningful. You ask yourself not just, what do I want to achieve, but who do I want to become in the process? The answer to that question helps you choose practices that support your wholeness, not just your performance. And this way of living starts to affect everything. Your relationships, your habits, your nervous system. When you live from the middle path, you become less reactive, more intentional. You speak more kindly. You listen more deeply. You hold space for others' imperfections because you've learned to hold space for your own. You also stop comparing so much. You don't need to measure yourself against someone else's timeline. Your growth is yours, quiet, steady, sacred. You trust that effort is not a race. It's a rhythm. Some days will be active, some days will be still. Both matter. Both are part of your path. And when setbacks come, and they will, you stop seeing them as proof you're broken. You start seeing them as reminders to come back, to realign, to reconnect with the intention behind your effort. This is not a soft excuse for laziness. It's the discipline of coming home to what matters most, over and over again. It's the courage to let go of who you thought you had to be and grow into who you truly are, with no harshness, no guilt, just clarity, commitment, and compassion. That's the power of the middle way. It doesn't yell, it doesn't demand, but it transforms everything it touches because it asks one honest thing: stop punishing yourself and start walking with yourself. Step by step, breath by breath, with gentleness, with intention. That's where real strength begins, and it's already within you. Let's keep going. There's more to uncover. Even with all the clarity in your efforts, all the self-compassion in your growth, there's still something that quietly lingers. A heaviness you carry, even as you heal. You don't talk about it often, but it follows you. The moments you wish you could undo, the versions of yourself you wish you could unbecome. A sentence you said too sharply. A path you didn't take. A chance you missed. That's where regret lives. Not always loud, but present, pressing, quietly shaping the way you see yourself. And here's the truth. No amount of effort will ever rewrite the past, but something else can free you from its grip. Not forgetting, not pretending, but understanding. In Buddhism, that freedom begins with one word: anicca, impermanence. A truth so simple it's easy to overlook. But once you see it, it changes everything. Nothing lasts. Not your feelings, not your failures, not even the version of you who made those choices you now regret. Everything moves, everything shifts, everything passes. This isn't a belief, it's a reality seen clearly. From the way your breath rises and falls to how the sky never holds the same color twice. From your happiest moments to your hardest days, none of it stays. That includes pain, that includes shame, that includes the judgment you keep replaying in your head. Regret feeds on the illusion that the past is fixed, that it's carved in stone and always reflecting who you are now. But impermanence tells the truth. The person who made that mistake is no longer here. That moment is gone. It's not who you are. It's not even yours anymore. It's just something that happened. A wave that rose and fell. When you sit with impermanence, something shifts inside you. You stop holding on so tightly. You stop punishing yourself for things that don't exist anymore. You begin to soften your grip on the need to control what cannot be touched. You see clearly that pain, no matter how sharp, cannot stay sharp forever. Its edges dull, its story fades, not because you force it out, but because it was never meant to stay. This doesn't mean you don't care. Impermanence doesn't erase responsibility, it transforms it. It reminds you that what matters most is how you carry your past, not how perfectly you lived it. It allows you to turn toward it with honesty and ask, what can I learn now that I've changed? And more importantly, how can I stop identifying with a moment that already passed? You don't have to keep reliving what already ended. Regret often comes from the belief that because something hurt, it must be permanent. but that's the illusion. Every experience is like a visitor. It shows up, it stays for a while, and then it leaves. The only reason it stays longer is because you keep reopening the door. Impermanence invites you to close that door, not out of denial, but out of respect for the present. This moment right now is alive. It's not shaped by the past unless you keep feeding it those old stories. Your breath now is not your breath from yesterday. Your thoughts are not yesterday's thoughts. And that's the power you hold, to let go of the idea that you are frozen in who you were. Even emotions that feel unbearable soften under the gaze of impermanence. Grief, shame, fear, they all rise like tides. You may feel like they'll drown you, but no tide holds forever. Everything within you moves. That movement is your proof that healing is possible, not because you will forget, but because you are not stuck. When you meditate on anicca, you start to notice the space between sensations. A thought arises. You watch it. It passes. A memory appears. It fades. At first, they come like waves crashing, but over time, you begin to witness their rhythm, noticing that every sensation is born, peaks, and dissolves, even the ones that hurt, especially those. This awareness isn't meant to numb you. It deepens your ability to feel without becoming overwhelmed. You stop merging with the pain. You stop saying, "I am this regret," and start seeing, "This regret is here, and it will go." That distance creates room for kindness, room for wisdom, room to breathe. It also gives you the courage to show up for life again. Regret has a way of freezing you, making you afraid to try again, to trust again, to move forward. But if nothing is permanent, then neither is failure. No one decision defines you. No wrong turn locks you into suffering. You can begin again because everything else already is. Even the stories you tell yourself about your worth are not fixed. You are not the person who failed a relationship. You are not the one who missed the opportunity. You are not the label you gave yourself in your lowest hour. All of those identities are temporary clothes you wore during a storm. They're not skin. You can take them off. And you don't need to rush into positivity. This is not about pretending everything's fine. It's about watching what arises and allowing it to pass on its own. In that process, you'll start to see that even the hardest emotions contain a natural wisdom. Regret shows you where your values live. It reveals what mattered to you, what you loved, what you longed for. And that insight doesn't need to hurt you. It can guide you if you let it move through, not root down. When you hold impermanence closely, you also begin to trust yourself more. You no longer panic when discomfort appears because you know it won't last. You become less reactive, more steady. You stop needing to fix every thought or control every mood. You learn to ride them out. With time, that becomes a quiet confidence that holds you together in the middle of change. This doesn't just apply to pain. It applies to pleasure, too. When you realize that even joy is temporary, you stop clinging to it. You stop fearing its end. You let yourself fully experience it, knowing it will pass, not with sadness, but with gratitude. That deepens your ability to live. Every moment becomes more precious, not because it stays, but because it doesn't. That's the strange gift of impermanence. It teaches you how to love the fleeting, to not waste time in self-hate, to not stay buried in guilt while the present quietly waits. Because that's what regret does. It steals your now. It keeps you bowing to a ghost while the door of this moment is wide open. So you begin to let go. Gently. You don't force it. You don't rush. You just start recognizing that what you're holding on to has already left. The past doesn't need your loyalty anymore. It only asks to be honored by your healing. And healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means loosening. Loosening the grip. Loosening the identity. Loosening the fear that you are stuck in who you used to be. You are not. When you embody Anicca, you begin to carry your memories differently. They are not weights. They are not warnings. They are just moments. Some painful, some beautiful, some unfinished. But all of them have already passed. You are the one still here, still breathing, still becoming. That's what impermanence returns to you, your life. Not as a blank slate, but as a living one. A space still unfolding. A chance to make peace with the past, not by rewriting it, but by letting it rest. You stop needing to chase closure. You stop obsessing over what should have happened. You make space for what can happen now. Regret no longer owns your story. It becomes one part of a much larger truth, that everything changes, and you are allowed to, too. Even the parts of you that feel broken, they shift. Slowly, quietly. But they do. Impermanence reminds you that nothing inside you is frozen, that every emotion, every belief, every wound is already in motion. You don't have to force transformation. It's happening. You just have to stop clinging to what wants to go. And it's not about letting go with coldness. It's about letting go with warmth. Like watching a leaf fall, not tearing it off the branch. You learn to release the need to relive it. You start choosing presence over punishment. When you feel regret rise again, and it will, you'll meet it differently. Not with fear, not with shame, but with a deep breath and the quiet knowing, this, too, will pass. And it does, every time, whether you resist or not. So why not resist less? You deserve to live free of the weight you've been carrying. You deserve to meet each moment without dragging every yesterday behind you. That is the freedom Anicca offers, not because it erases the past, but because it reminds you you're not in it anymore. And that truth, that steady, living truth, is waiting for you now, in your next breath, in your next step, in your next soft, patient release. Keep walking. There is more to feel, and even more to let go. There comes a point when words are no longer enough. You've tried thinking your way into peace. You've repeated affirmations. You've said the right things, thought the right thoughts, even softened your tone with yourself. But still, some part of you stays untouched, tight, guarded, aching beneath the surface. You've come far by learning to witness your thoughts, to be patient with your regrets, to walk the middle path without force. But what about the parts of you that live below your thinking? The parts that store tension, the ones that flinch before you even speak, the ones that haven't yet felt safe, even when your mind says you're safe. This is where loving kindness has to become more than a concept. It has to become something your body can feel. Metta, the practice of unconditional goodwill, is often taught as a meditation. You sit quietly. You repeat phrases like, "May I be happy, may I be safe, may I be free." And at first, that's powerful. Words have energy. Intention creates change. But for some people, especially those who've lived through trauma or chronic shame, words alone don't reach the places where the pain lives. The body doesn't always believe what the mind says. That's why metta has to be embodied, not just spoken. Because kindness is not just a feeling, it's a posture, a rhythm, a way of being that your nervous system can learn over time through movement, breath, and touch. When you carry stress or fear for a long time, your body adapts. Shoulders lift, jaw tightens, hands curl in. Your entire being begins to prepare for threat, even when no threat is present. And the longer this continues, the more kindness starts to feel unsafe. Your system resists it, not because it doesn't want it, but because it forgot how to trust it. Embodying metta is the slow, patient process of reminding your body that kindness is not dangerous. That softness is not weakness. That presence can be held, not feared. It's a different kind of meditation, one that happens not only in stillness, but in motion, not just through breath, but through gesture. Start by placing your hand gently on your heart, not because you need to feel anything special, but because this act itself is an offering. Warmth, pressure, presence. It doesn't require belief, just touch. Your hand says, "I'm here," and slowly the body begins to believe it. In that stillness, you can add breath, not to control it, just to notice. Let it be soft, unforced. The breath tells your system, there's no emergency. And with time, the breath and the hand begin to speak together. Safety, comfort, peace. Sometimes it helps to move with metta, not in a performative way, not for exercise, but as an expression of care, a simple sway, a rocking side to side, a slow stretch that doesn't push or strain, movement that follows what feels good, not what looks good. This is a language your body understands. And in that movement, something subtle happens. You begin to unwind the tension you didn't know you were carrying. You start to feel space in places that were tight, not because you forced yourself to relax, but because you allowed yourself to feel safe enough to soften. That's the power of somatic practice. It doesn't talk at the body, it listens to it, and it responds with presence instead of pressure. Even walking can become a metta practice. Let your steps slow, let your arms relax. Feel the contact of your feet on the ground. Walk like you're accompanying someone you love, because you are. You're walking with yourself. In traditional loving-kindness meditation, the focus is often on others. May all beings be happy. But that kindness has to pass through you first. If you're disconnected from your own body, your kindness toward others risks becoming theoretical. But when you bring kindness directly into the places in you that hurt, something shifts. Your empathy deepens, your presence becomes fuller. You're no longer extending compassion from yourself, you're extending it through yourself. That's why embodied metta matters. It connects the internal and external. It helps you become a safe place, first to yourself, then to others. Touch plays a role here too. Not all touch is healing, but the right kind, offered slowly and with consent, can undo years of harshness. Simple things, a warm hand on your stomach, wrapping yourself in a blanket, cradling your own face gently. These are acts of kindness The body remembers long after the mind forgets. If you've never been held gently before, these gestures can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. That's okay. Start small. One hand, one breath, one moment. You're not forcing anything. You're creating a new language, a language where safety doesn't mean silence, where comfort doesn't come at the cost of self-abandonment, where kindness isn't earned, it's offered freely. Somatic metta also includes your environment. Soft light, comfortable clothes, a space that feels calming. The body responds to surroundings. It wants cues that say, "You are allowed to rest here." Don't underestimate the healing power of comfort. It's not a luxury. It's a signal to your nervous system. You're no longer in survival. When your body begins to believe that, everything changes. Your breath deepens, your movements slow, your voice softens. You stop bracing against life. And in that softness, there's space for feeling again, not in a way that overwhelms, but in a way that reconnects. You begin to notice how often you've moved mechanically, how often you've rushed through your day without checking in. Embodied metta interrupts that pattern. It asks you to pause, to feel, to return to yourself over and over, not as a task, but as a kindness. Even small routines can become rituals of care. The way you brush your hair, how you make your bed, how you prepare food, all of it can be infused with intention. You're not just completing tasks, you're practicing presence. You're telling yourself through action, you matter. And slowly, that message becomes believable. The body doesn't respond to ideas. It responds to signals, safety, warmth, slowness. When you offer those again and again, you begin to build a new foundation, one where your inner voice doesn't have to scream to be heard, where your stress doesn't run the show, where your worth isn't tied to how much you produce. Instead, your worth becomes embodied, felt, known, not in your head, but in your breath, your posture, your pace. This work doesn't need to be dramatic. It doesn't need to be perfect. You're not performing self-love. You're living it, quietly, honestly, through how you sit, how you reach for your cup, how you touch your chest when emotions rise. Every gesture becomes a way of saying, "I'm not leaving myself behind." And you'll find that the more you practice this, the more available you become for joy, for connection, for moments of real presence with others, because you're not split anymore. You're not trying to offer kindness you haven't given yourself. You're not trying to hold others while abandoning your own body. You are here, rooted, present, whole. This is what metta beyond words looks like. It's not about perfect phrasing or loving everyone equally. It's about how you show up, fully, in the body you live in, with the breath you have in the moment you're in. And when those hard moments return, as they always do, you'll meet them with a different kind of strength. Not resistance, not collapse, but contact, touch, grounded kindness that doesn't need to fix, just to stay. So now, let the words fade a little. Let the body speak, through softness, through breath, through every small movement that says, "I am here, and I am not unkind to myself anymore." You've earned that. Now let your body feel it. Even with softness in your breath and kindness in your hands, the voice still comes. You know the one. The voice that questions your worth just when you begin to trust it. The one that whispers you're not doing enough, not healing fast enough, not being good enough. It arrives uninvited, louder on quiet days, sharper when you start to feel safe. And it can undo so much progress with just a sentence. That voice isn't a stranger, it knows exactly where to press. But what if it isn't here to destroy you? What if it isn't even your enemy? In Buddhist teaching, this voice has a name: Mara. Mara wasn't just a metaphor. He was the embodiment of illusion, fear, temptation, and doubt, the very forces that tried to stop the Buddha from awakening. Mara brought fear when the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree. He brought seductive promises, ridicule, even armies of inner demons. And yet the Buddha didn't run. He didn't fight. He didn't deny. He simply said, "I see you, Mara." And with that recognition, Mara lost his power. This teaching lives on, not as a myth, but as a mirror. Mara still visits, not outside of us, but within. Every time the inner critic rises, every time fear speaks as if it knows the truth, Mara is at the door. The practice isn't to silence him, it's to see him. The mistake most people make is trying to overcome the inner critic by force. They want to drown it in positivity, argue with it, banish it. But the more you resist Mara, the stronger he becomes, because resistance feeds illusion. What starves illusion is awareness. When self-judgment arises, the work is to turn toward it with the clarity the Buddha showed, not to agree with it, not to obey it, but to greet it without panic, to name it as it is. This allows you to stay rooted while the wave passes. Your inner critic often sounds like truth. That's part of what makes it so convincing. But most of the time, it isn't telling the truth. It's repeating old messages from pain, from history, from voices that were louder than your own. It's built from moments where you felt not enough and then repeated itself so often it began to sound like fact. What the Buddha teaches us through Mara is this: just because the thought appears doesn't mean it belongs to you. Just because the voice rises doesn't mean you must follow it. That's a radical shift. You don't have to identify with the voice to understand it. You can listen to your critic as a signal, not a sentence. A flare that tells you, there's a wound here, there's fear here, there's an old pattern trying to protect you, even if it's clumsy about it. Because that's the truth. The inner critic, as harsh as it can be, often speaks from a desire to protect. It developed when you needed armor, when love felt conditional, when failure felt dangerous. It taught you to scan for your own flaws before someone else could point them out. It became your defense. But what once protected you may now be the very thing that keeps you from peace. So instead of hating that voice, get curious. What is it afraid will happen if you let yourself rest? If you forgive yourself? If you stop trying so hard? What story is it still holding? This is the beginning of transformation, not by overpowering the critic, but by disarming it with compassion. The same way the Buddha stayed seated when Mara arrived, you stay present, you stay grounded, you breathe. Over time, you start to see patterns. The critic usually appears in familiar places, when you're tired, when you're uncertain, when you're stepping into something new. It's predictable. That predictability is your power, because once you recognize the pattern, you're not under its spell anymore. You become the observer, not the target. And here's what's important. Seeing the critic doesn't mean indulging it. Compassion is not agreement. You don't have to believe the voice to honor what it's showing you. You can say, "I hear you, I know you're scared, but I'm choosing a different response now." This practice builds resilience, not the kind that blocks feeling, but the kind that lets you stand inside feeling without being swallowed by it. You develop a calm center that doesn't collapse when Mara arrives. You become less reactive, more steady. You stop being surprised by your inner darkness and start learning from it. That's what Mara becomes, a teacher. Not because he's right, but because he reveals the places in you that still ache. And those places, once seen, can be cared for. You begin to recognize the critic's strategies. It often speaks in absolutes. Always, never, should, can't. It uses comparison as a weapon. It questions your motives. It doubts your joy. But when you slow down, when you stay curious, you begin to notice. This voice isn't original. It doesn't speak from wisdom. It speaks from fear. And once you see that, you can respond differently. You can set boundaries. You can say, "Not now." You can pause and bring your awareness to your body, your breath, the ground under your feet. These are anchors. They bring you back when Mara pulls you into the storm. Sometimes it helps to externalize the voice, not to push it away, but to give it form. Some people journal as if they're speaking to their inner critic directly. Others draw it, name it, make it a character. Not to mock it, but to separate its message from their identity. When the voice is seen as something visiting, not something you are, the space around it grows. That space is where choice lives. The Buddha didn't pretend Mara wasn't there, but he also didn't confuse Mara's presence with failure. That's another trap, thinking that because doubt or self-judgment appeared, you must be doing something wrong. No, Mara appears because you are close to something meaningful. He comes when you're growing, when you're softening, when you're becoming more free. So next time that voice shows up, see it for what it is. A signpost, a moment of awareness, a reminder that you're alive and awake, that something old is being questioned, that something new wants to rise. The more you practice this, the less power the critic holds. Not because it stops entirely, but because you stop identifying with it. You start making choices based on what's real now, not what fear says will happen. You build a life not around protection, but around presence. And that changes everything. You begin to trust yourself again. You begin to allow imperfection. You begin to stay with discomfort without collapsing. You begin to speak to yourself the way the Buddha spoke to Mara, not with anger, not with shame, but with a calm and quiet knowing. I see you. I know what you are. But I will not give you control. This is not bypassing. This is deep honesty. A refusal to reject the difficult parts of yourself. A willingness to meet them with wisdom. That's what turns Mara into a mirror, not of your flaws, but of your capacity to grow in the presence of them. Every time you choose presence over panic, truth over fear, kindness over cruelty, you are doing the work, the real work, the one that doesn't look like perfection, but like sitting under the tree of your life and staying seated when the doubts arise. You are not broken because you hear that voice. You are not behind because fear still visits. You are becoming right here, right now. and Mara is just the echo of who you no longer are. Let the echo pass. Stay rooted. There is more peace ahead. After learning to face the inner critic without fear, after choosing not to run from it, but to meet it with steadiness, another kind of space begins to open. It's quieter, deeper, not filled with answers, but with something else entirely, something most people avoid. Silence. Not the kind that feels empty or lonely, the kind that feels whole, the kind that holds you instead of exposing you. This silence isn't absence, it's presence. And in Buddhist practice, it's known as noble silence, a discipline that has nothing to do with repression and everything to do with respect. We live in a world that constantly asks us to speak, to explain, to prove, to respond. Silence is often misunderstood as weakness or awkwardness or withdrawal. But in Buddhist tradition, silence is sacred. It is intentional. It's a boundary, a practice, a way of remembering that not everything valuable must be said. Some truths are too full to be broken into words. Noble silence is not just about being quiet on the outside. It's about becoming deeply present inside. It's a way of listening, not only to others, but to yourself. To sit without filling the space, to breathe without preparing a reply, to be here without needing to perform, and in doing so, to reclaim the power of your own presence. There is dignity in silence, especially when you choose it, especially when it comes from self-respect, not avoidance. Speaking less doesn't mean thinking less. It means choosing carefully what deserves your voice. It means recognizing that your words carry weight and that you are not obligated to use them to defend or justify your being. In noble silence, the mind begins to show itself more clearly. When there is no need to respond, you begin to notice the pace at which thoughts arise. You see what they cling to. You witness your habits, interrupting, anticipating, fixing, and gradually that awareness brings freedom, not through control, but through seeing. You stop being pulled into every reaction. You learn to rest in the pause. This pause is where compassion grows. Because when you stop speaking, you also stop pushing. You make space for discomfort to be felt, for confusion to be met without judgment, for emotion to move without being packaged into neat explanations. You stop trying to narrate your life in real time, and you start letting it unfold with honesty. Noble silence is a form of self-care that doesn't look like self-help. It's not flashy. It won't be praised by people who measure value in how much you share. But in that silence, something ancient wakes up. A quiet knowing that you don't have to earn your right to exist by constantly producing thoughts, reactions, or opinions. This doesn't mean silence is always peaceful. In fact, at first, it may feel loud inside. When the distractions fall away, what's left is you, your breath, your body, your memories. The parts of you that usually get drowned out by noise will rise, but that's the point. In noble silence, those parts finally have a chance to be heard, not by others, but by you. Silence becomes a mirror. It reflects your inner world without judgment. You see where your mind runs when there's nothing pulling it forward. You hear the tone of your inner voice more clearly, and once you hear it, you can begin to soften it. This practice builds a foundation of trust. Trust in your own presence. Trust in your ability to hold space for yourself. You don't need to say something wise to be wise. You don't need to sound calm to be calm. You don't need to explain your worth to feel it. And in this silence, something surprising begins to happen. Your self-worth deepens. Not because you added more to yourself, but because you removed the pressure to constantly prove anything. You begin to feel that just being is enough. That presence itself carries value. That awareness without commentary is a kind of inner gold. Noble silence also transforms how you relate to others. You begin to listen differently. You stop jumping in to fix or to be understood. You give others the space to speak without rushing their words or polishing their emotions. And in doing so, you become more trustworthy, more grounded, more open. You learn that not every moment needs a response. Some moments just need space, a quiet, respectful space where people and you can feel seen without needing to be explained. That restraint is not coldness. It's clarity. It's knowing the difference between speaking to connect and speaking to fill a gap. It's learning to trust that silence can be just as intimate, just as healing as anything spoken. Practicing noble silence doesn't mean you withdraw from life. It means you enter it more fully, without the filter of performance. You become more available to the moment as it is. Noticing the temperature of the air, the way your chest rises, the texture of your thoughts. It's mindfulness that goes beyond techniques. It's just being, honestly, without noise. Over time, this quiet creates a strength that doesn't shout. It lives in your posture, your breath, your gaze. It comes from knowing you don't have to fill the space to belong in it. You become less reactive. You respond only when it's real. And your words, when they do come, carry more weight. Not because they're louder, but because they come from stillness. You also start to notice how often noise comes from discomfort, talking to avoid awkwardness, explaining to manage others' feelings, filling silence because it feels exposed. Noble silence invites you to sit through those edges, to stay present when the urge to speak rises, not to repress it, but to question it. What are you trying to protect? What feels unsafe in this quiet? And slowly, you realize the silence itself is not the threat. It's your relationship to it that needs healing. You may discover that silence has been used against you in the past, weaponized as punishment, rejection, control. That's why it can feel threatening. But this silence is different. This silence is chosen. It's sacred. It's not shutting down, it's tuning in. It's not absence, it's full presence without noise. And through this discipline, you start to reclaim silence as your own. You stop letting it belong only to suffering. You let it become a sanctuary, a practice, a refuge where nothing needs to be said for something real to be felt. It's important to understand that noble silence doesn't mean disconnection. It means rootedness. You're still here, you're still aware, you're just not forcing anything. You're letting the moment breathe before adding to it. And that breathing space changes you. It teaches you that your value isn't tied to output, that you don't need to explain every feeling to validate it, that you don't need to respond to every thought for it to pass. It reminds you that silence isn't emptiness, it's a doorway into deeper listening, into gentler presence, into self-respect that isn't built on performance but on stillness. And with practice, that stillness becomes something you trust, not just in meditation, but in life, in conversations, in conflict, in decision-making. You pause more, you react less, you speak with care, you live with clarity. You become someone who isn't afraid of silence, because you've learned that in silence, nothing is missing. You are whole, just as you are. That is radical. In a world addicted to noise, constant talking, endless opinions, choosing silence as a form of self-respect is a revolutionary act. It's not a lack. It's a fullness that doesn't need to be broadcast. And in that fullness, something ancient returns. A kind of peace that isn't tied to circumstance, a kind of power that doesn't seek attention, a kind of presence that simply is, unshaken, unperformed, undeniable. So sit in that, even just for a while. No need to explain, no need to fix. Just be still, just be here. This silence holds you. And it speaks, not with words, but with truth. The more you sit in silence, the more you begin to hear yourself. Not just your thoughts, but your intentions, your patterns, your edge between calm and chaos. You start noticing how often you bend to please, react to protect, or speak just to avoid discomfort. You become more aware of what pulls you off-center and what keeps you anchored. That's when a new kind of clarity starts to rise, not just about how you live on the outside, but how you live within. And with that clarity comes the need for protection, not from the world, but from the parts of you that act against your peace without meaning to. This is where the 5 precepts come alive. Often mistaken for rules or commandments, the precepts are not rigid laws meant to judge or shame. They are boundaries. And not just for behavior, but for energy, for intention, for how you carry yourself through the moment-to-moment choices that shape your life from the inside out. These precepts were never designed as tools for control. They are practices of respect, first toward others, but also toward your own mind, your own nervous system, your own sense of inner stability. Each precept is an invitation to stop planting seeds that grow into suffering. They are acts of kindness in disguise, building a life that doesn't contradict itself. The first precept is to refrain from harming living beings. This doesn't just mean physical violence. It includes the more subtle ways we cause harm, through cruelty in our thoughts, through harsh words, through the quiet aggression of self-rejection. When you commit to not harming, you begin to notice how often your mind turns against itself. The times you judge your feelings, the times you punish yourself for not being further along, the small, constant pressure to be someone else. Living this precept internally means catching yourself when you act like your own enemy and choosing instead to be an ally to your own healing. This boundary creates space. It interrupts the cycle of inner criticism. It teaches you that you do not have to obey every thought that arises, that harming yourself with guilt, shame, or comparison is not strength, it's conditioning, and you are allowed to grow beyond it. The second precept is to refrain from taking what is not given. Beyond the obvious meaning, this points to a more intimate truth. How often do you steal from your own presence? How often do you take time from yourself by staying in conversations you don't want to be in, giving energy you don't have, sacrificing your rest to meet expectations that no longer serve you? Taking what is not freely given includes stealing from your own capacity to breathe, to reflect, to be. When you honor this precept within, you begin to ask, is this choice truly mine? Am I moving from alignment or from habit? This boundary builds integrity. It shows you that peace isn't just about what you do, it's about what you no longer take on. You stop robbing yourself of stillness. You stop giving away your truth for the sake of harmony that isn't real. You start holding your time, your presence, your boundaries as sacred. The third precept is to refrain from sexual misconduct. At its core, this is a commitment to honoring connection, not manipulating, not using, not escaping into desire to avoid being with what is. But on the internal level, this also means not abandoning your own values for temporary relief. It means noticing the moments when craving pulls you away from self-respect, when you seek out intensity to avoid stillness, when you confuse being wanted with being loved. This precept invites you to bring gentleness back to your desires, not by suppressing them, but by seeing their roots. What are you reaching for when you seek closeness? Is it intimacy or is it escape? What part of you believes you must be touched to be seen? What wounds are being reenacted when you betray yourself in the name of being chosen? Living this precept inside yourself teaches you how to stay with longing without letting it distort your choices. It helps you build safety in your own body so that connection with others can be free of desperation. You stop performing closeness and start embodying it. The fourth precept is to refrain from false speech. This isn't just about lying to others, it's about noticing the lies you tell yourself. The ways you say, "I'm fine," when you're not. The ways you shrink your truth to avoid rejection. The ways you twist your own experience to fit into a story that makes you feel more acceptable. These are the moments when you abandon yourself for comfort or control. This precept offers something radical, the possibility of telling the truth, even quietly, even just to yourself. You begin to track the small betrayals, the ways you dilute your needs, the way you hide your feelings behind a mask of ease. Living this precept as an inner boundary means you stop gaslighting yourself. You stop calling your sensitivity a weakness. You stop pretending you're over things that still ache. Telling the truth doesn't mean telling everything. It means not telling what isn't real. It means being willing to say, "This matters to me," or "I'm not okay with this," or "I don't know." It means being honest enough to sit with discomfort instead of covering it in convenience. This boundary becomes a root system for real confidence, the kind that doesn't depend on approval because it's built on truth. The fifth precept is to refrain from intoxicants that cloud the mind. It's easy to take this only in the literal sense, avoiding substances that impair judgment. But at a deeper level, it points to all the ways we numb. Social media scrolling, obsessive planning, overthinking, gossip, drama, fantasy, these too can cloud the mind. And each time we reach for these distractions, we move further from our center. This precept becomes a practice of staying awake. You start noticing the impulse to escape. You witness how quickly the mind tries to leave discomfort by grabbing onto stimulation. And you pause. You breathe. You learn to stay. Not forever. Just long enough to see that you can. You stop feeding the habits that dull your clarity. You start choosing presence, even when it's imperfect. And the more you do this, the more you trust yourself to feel, to see, to respond. Not from reaction, but from depth. Together, These 5 precepts form more than guidelines. They become an internal framework for peace. They stop being about rules and start being about refuge, a way to protect your clarity, a way to choose non-violence, even in the smallest thoughts, a way to remember that your life is shaped not just by big decisions, but by daily intentions. And they don't require perfection, they require honesty. They ask for consistency, not control, for awareness, not shame, for commitment, not rigidity. You will slip, you will forget, but every time you return to them, you strengthen your foundation. The beauty of these precepts is that they are not externally enforced. They're lived from within. No one else has to see them for them to be powerful. No one else needs to understand them for them to shape your path. Their power comes from how they live in your body, in your voice, in your breath, in your decisions when no one is watching. They create a kind of quiet alignment, a life where your inner world doesn't contradict your outer actions, where your values are not just beliefs, but embodied truths, where your peace isn't something you wait for, it's something you protect, choice by choice. And the more you live from this place, the less you feel pulled in different directions. You become more whole, more grounded, more consistent with yourself, not because you've become strict, but because you've become clear. You stop asking, "What do I feel like doing?" and start asking, "What brings me closer to peace?" That shift changes your entire relationship to effort. It makes discipline sustainable because it's no longer punishment, it's alignment. This alignment becomes a form of self-respect that doesn't need to be proven. It just is. It lives in the way you move through your day, the way you make decisions, the way you hold your own energy. And from this place, peace is not something you chase. It's something you return to, over and over. Each time you honor these precepts, not from fear but from care, you remind yourself, "I am allowed to live in a way that supports my wholeness." And when that becomes your baseline, you stop looking for external validation. You stop needing constant reassurance. You begin to trust the shape of your life, not because it's perfect, but because it's built on values that hold. So take these precepts not as limits, but as gifts, not as judgments, but as offerings. A structure gentle enough to hold your complexity and strong enough to carry your healing. Let them live inside you, not as demands, but as directions pointing you back home. That home is not made of silence or stillness alone. It's made of choices. Choices that say, "I will not harm myself to belong. I will not abandon myself for approval. I will not trade clarity for comfort." This is how peace becomes real, not through escape, but through living with care, not just toward others, but toward yourself. When you begin making choices that protect your peace, when you start living from your values instead of your wounds, something deep within starts to shift. You may still feel messy, you may still carry doubt, but beneath that, something stronger begins to stir, a quiet pull toward dignity, a knowing that you were never meant to just survive your life, you were meant to awaken something timeless within it. There is a Buddhist text that speaks directly to that part of you, not to your habits, not to your doubts, but to the core of your being, the part that was never broken to begin with, the Lotus Sutra. Of all the teachings in Mahayana Buddhism, the Lotus Sutra is among the most radical and affirming. It teaches that every single person, regardless of their past, their karma, or their current confusion, already possesses the qualities of a Buddha. That enlightenment is not something far away, reserved for monks or saints. It is already within you, present even in your most painful moments. This is not a metaphor. This is the core message. Your life, just as it is, contains limitless value. Not in the future, not after you've healed everything. Now. This view changes everything. Most spiritual systems speak of goals, some state to be reached, some version of yourself to become. But the Lotus Sutra begins from a different truth. You are already it, not theoretically, actually. The practice then is not about earning anything. It's about revealing what's always been there. This teaching matters most when you feel furthest from it. When you're stuck in patterns you promised you'd outgrow. When shame returns and whispers that nothing's really changed. When you feel like you've failed at being the person you wanted to be. It's in those moments that the Lotus Sutra speaks loudest. Because it doesn't say, you will have value if. It says, you have value now, even here. One of the core ideas in this sutra is the concept of expedient means. This means that the Buddha teaches differently depending on what someone needs to hear. Not to trick them, but to meet them, to help them awaken from where they are. The implication is profound. Your current state isn't a problem. It's part of the path. Even your confusion can become wisdom when seen through the right lens. You begin to trust that your current self, with all its tension and tenderness, is not in the way. It is the way. The Lotus Sutra also shares parables, stories that reveal this dignity in everyday life. One of the most well-known is the parable of the burning house. In this story, a father finds his children playing inside a burning building. They don't see the danger and refuse to leave. So the father, knowing their hearts, tells them that outside are carts full of treasures and toys. The children run out, saved by love disguised as strategy. Later, when they are safe, the father gives them gifts even greater than promised, not as a reward, but as a recognition. The lesson is clear. Sometimes the path begins in confusion. Sometimes awakening starts with what your heart can understand. And behind every teaching, even those born from urgency or longing, is a deeper truth. Your worth has never been in question. This story reflects how your life unfolds too. You may have been drawn to healing out of pain. You may have chased peace to escape suffering. That's okay. That was your entrance. The deeper truth is waiting. You are already whole. You don't need to feel whole to be whole. The Lotus Sutra doesn't speak to your mood. It speaks to your nature. And your nature, in every breath, is Buddha nature. That means clarity is always available. It means compassion is never outside of reach. It means your value is not fragile. It's not conditional. It's not on pause until you figure everything out. This teaching can be difficult to accept, especially if you've spent years believing you had to earn your place. But there is nothing you need to fix to become worthy. There is only learning how to see what's already alive within you, and that seeing doesn't happen all at once. It happens through practice, through showing up even when it's hard, through treating yourself not as a project, but as a sacred text, one you read slowly, kindly, with reverence. When you begin to approach your life from this place, everything shifts. Your struggles don't disappear, but they no longer define you. You stop labeling yourself by your worst moments. You start seeing those moments as part of a much larger story. One where even darkness has a role, not as failure, but as fertile ground. This is why the Lotus Sutra speaks of the lotus flower itself. It grows in mud, not despite it, but because of it. Its roots are deep in the dark, but it blooms above the surface, beautiful, unsoiled, open. This image isn't poetic, it's instructional. Your suffering is not a stain, it is the soil. And the bloom isn't something you have to force, it's something you allow. Allowing begins when you stop measuring your growth with the wrong tools. Progress is not always visible, it's not always loud. Sometimes it's the decision to try again. Sometimes it's the choice to rest without guilt. Sometimes it's saying no to self-violence. These are not small things, they are petals. One by one, they open you. The sutra reminds us that awakening is not far away, that it is already happening. That you are not separate from the Buddha, you are not even walking toward him. You are walking as him. The journey isn't a distance, it's a deepening. This doesn't mean you'll never feel lost, but even your confusion is seen by this teaching as a part of your unfolding. It tells you that enlightenment isn't lightness alone. It includes struggle. It includes returning again and again to a self you forgot was already sacred. When you live from this perspective, you begin to change how you respond to your lowest moments. Instead of collapsing into shame, you meet yourself with respect, not because you feel enlightened, but because you know your dignity isn't up for debate. You stop trying to escape yourself. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What is needed here?" That shift is subtle, but it changes the trajectory of your entire path. You become a student of your own sacredness. And this isn't pride, it's reverence, not ego, but devotion to the part of you that sees clearly, even through confusion. You begin to trust that your inner life holds wisdom you don't have to force out. You just have to stop denying its presence. That trust allows you to move more gently through the world. You stop judging others so quickly, because you begin to understand. If this dignity lives in you, it lives in them. Even when they're caught in anger, even when they act from fear, their Buddha nature too is not erased by confusion. It's only hidden, just like yours once was. This doesn't mean excusing harm. It means recognizing that even those who have forgotten their light are not beyond it. And when you see this in others, you strengthen it in yourself. You also begin to relate to your past differently. The parts of your life that once felt wasted begin to carry meaning. Not because you rewrite them, but because you see them as part of the soil. You begin to honor what once hurt, not to glorify pain, but to recognize that from it, something true has grown. This kind of respect builds resilience, not the kind that hardens you, but the kind that allows you to bend without breaking, to rise from difficulty without denying it, to speak with tenderness even when it shakes. And through this, a deeper commitment forms. Not to being perfect, but to being real. Not to earning peace, but to remembering it. Not to rising above life, but to being fully inside it, awake, whole, and unashamed. This is the dignity the Lotus Sutra points to. Not something rare, not something distant, something immediate, something unshakable, something that belongs to you now, even as you read these words. And the more you live from it, the more you start recognizing it in the quietest places, in the way you forgive yourself after snapping, in the way you start over without needing applause, in the way you rest without guilt. These are not mistakes. These are signs that you remember. This teaching is not easy. It's not always intuitive, but it's yours. You don't have to believe in it all at once. You only have to begin acting like it might be true. Speak like someone with inner worth. Move like someone whose life holds meaning. Breathe like someone who doesn't have to perform to matter. The Lotus Sutra doesn't ask you to worship anything outside of yourself. It asks you to see clearly what's already within, to treat your life as a sacred path, not when it's polished, but especially when it's not. So continue, with dignity, with awareness, with the deep, radical knowing that the most beautiful parts of you were never gone. They were simply waiting to be seen. And now you are ready to see. Once you begin to trust in your inner dignity, once you stop chasing worth and start uncovering it, a quiet kind of strength begins to settle in. You move through life a little differently, less desperate, more present. But even then, there is a pull that remains, subtle, persuasive, and often disguised as wisdom. It tells you to keep reaching, to keep fixing, to keep building a better version of yourself. It speaks in the language of growth, but underneath it is still grasping, still craving, still whispering that who you are is not yet enough. This is the suffering of becoming. In Buddhism, this is called bhava tanha, the craving to become. It is one of the 3 types of desire the Buddha identified as a root of suffering. While some forms of desire are obvious, craving for pleasure or possessions, bhava tanha is different. It hides behind self-improvement, behind ambition, behind the idea that your value is always one step away. This craving to become is subtle because it often looks like progress. It disguises itself as discipline. It pretends to be clarity, but in truth, it keeps you caught in a loop, always striving, never arriving. It convinces you that peace will come after the next milestone, after the next breakthrough, after you finally fix whatever part of you still feels broken. But that moment never arrives, because every time you get close, the target moves. This cycle of becoming can take many forms. It might look like chasing perfection in your healing, believing that once you're fully healed, then you'll be able to rest. It might look like constantly upgrading your habits, your goals, your image, believing that the next version of yourself will finally feel like home. But in this chase, you're not growing, you're running. And the one you're running from is yourself, as you are now. What makes bhava tanha so painful is that it doesn't just exhaust you. It divides you. It tells you there's a future self worth loving and a present self to endure until you get there. It splits your experience into a before and after, and in doing so, it robs you of now. The Buddha taught that this craving is suffering not because wanting something is wrong, but because wanting to become someone else means rejecting what already is. It's not desire alone that binds you. It's the way you wrap your identity around it. You begin to believe you are the one who is not yet enough. You forget that your value isn't in your potential, it's in your presence. Letting go of bhava tanha doesn't mean giving up on change. It doesn't mean staying stuck. It means releasing the desperation. It means recognizing that growth born from self-hatred only deepens the wound. That effort grounded in fear cannot lead to peace. True transformation doesn't come from running from yourself. It comes from staying, from making room for who you are without needing to shape it into something else. And paradoxically, it's that allowing that creates the deepest kind of change, not forced, not rushed, but real. This kind of letting go is not passive, it's not indifference, it's an act of love, a refusal to keep treating yourself like a problem, a decision to stop measuring your value in what you have not yet become. You begin to turn your attention to the habits that feed this craving. The constant comparison, the never-ending self-analysis, the addiction to productivity masked as self-betterment. You begin to question, who is this voice trying to impress? Whose version of better am I trying to live up to? Often, this craving comes from old conditioning, messages received early in life that said love must be earned, that stillness is laziness, that achievement is safety. And if those messages were strong enough, they become internalized. They start sounding like your own thoughts. But they are not the truth. You begin to unlearn them, not through resistance, but through attention. You start noticing the moment you try to speed up your growth. You feel the tension in your chest when you think you're falling behind. You watch the way your mind tells you that you're only okay if you're improving. And then you pause. You don't need to change the thought. You just stop believing it. This pause is powerful. It breaks the cycle. It interrupts the momentum. It reminds you that nothing outside of this breath is required for you to be whole. This doesn't mean the desire to grow disappears, but it becomes quieter, softer, more honest. You no longer chase growth to escape yourself. You grow because you care, because you're curious, because you want to see what blooms when you stop trying to control the garden. This shift transforms everything. You stop rushing your healing. You stop pushing through exhaustion. You stop trying to constantly upgrade your identity. Instead, you become more interested in depth than speed, in integration, not appearance. You begin to ask different questions. Not, how can I be better, but what do I need in this moment? Not, what's wrong with me, but what part of me still needs care? These questions bring you closer to yourself. They build trust. And from that trust, real change can grow, not from pressure, but from presence. Letting go of bhava tanha also frees you from the illusion that you must earn rest, that you must earn gentleness, that stillness is something reserved for the future. You stop seeing rest as a break from the work. You start seeing it as the work itself. And in that rest, you reconnect with something deeper than identity. You begin to feel your life not as a project, but as a process. Not as something to fix, but as something to honor. This is how suffering begins to ease. Not through arrival, but through release. You begin to see that the more you let go of who you think you should become, the more space you create for who you are to unfold. This unfolding is natural, like breath, like sleep, like seasons. It doesn't need to be forced, it only needs to be allowed. And when you forget, and you will, you come back. Not with punishment, not with shame, but with the quiet recognition. Ah, there's that craving again. You meet it with kindness. You let it pass. And in doing so, you return again to yourself, because that is the real destination, not a better version of you, but a deeper connection to the one who's already here. This understanding doesn't mean you stop setting intentions. It means you stop tying your worth to their outcome. It means you hold your goals with open hands. You act with care, but you don't grip the future. You let your path unfold step by step, knowing that each step is complete in itself. You begin to value being over becoming. You start trusting that the person you are when you're not trying to be someone else is the person worth knowing, worth listening to, worth loving. And that person isn't waiting in some distant future. That person is already here, breathing, feeling, becoming, not through effort, but through presence. So let the craving soften. Let the noise quiet. Let the urgency dissolve. There is nothing missing in you. There is only more to meet, more to hold, more to welcome. Without the pressure to become, you begin to belong. When the pressure to constantly become fades, when you no longer chase a future version of yourself to feel whole, a different kind of silence fills the space. But within that silence, there's still a voice. Not the loud one, the one that doubted, judged, compared. That voice quiets. What remains is the quieter one you rarely noticed before. The voice you speak to yourself with when no one is listening. The one that doesn't just comment on your life, but shapes it. This voice matters more than you think. In Buddhist thought, there is a concept called upaya, skillful means. It refers to the idea that the truth is not only what is factually correct, but what leads to liberation. The Buddha used different teachings for different people, not because he was inconsistent, but because he understood that what helps one person heal might not help another. He met people where they were, offering them what they could hold. That wasn't manipulation. It was wisdom. Compassion made practical. This principle isn't just for teachers or monks. It's for you, right now, especially in how you speak to yourself. You've likely been told to just be honest with yourself, to tell yourself the truth, no matter how harsh it sounds. But truth without care can become a weapon. Honesty without skill can deepen your wounds instead of healing them. The question is not just, is this true, but is this helpful? Does this move me closer to freedom or deeper into shame? Skillful means asks you to consider the effect of your words, not only their accuracy. When you're tired and hurting, telling yourself you're just being lazy may feel true, but it doesn't help. It reinforces an identity that makes healing harder. Instead, skillful speech might sound like, "You're overwhelmed, let's take this one step at a time." That's not lying. That's kindness shaped into language. Your inner dialogue is not just background noise. It teaches your nervous system what to expect. It either builds safety or reinforces danger. Every thought is like a path. The more you walk it, the more familiar it becomes. Skillful speech helps you build paths that lead home, not further away from yourself. Sometimes you may need different language for different states. When you feel strong, you can hold more direct truth. When you feel fragile, you may need softness. This flexibility is not weakness, it's intelligence. You adapt the message to the moment because you care about the outcome, not just being right. Skillful means is not about sugarcoating. It's about choosing your words the way a healer chooses medicine. Not every pain needs the same treatment. Not every voice needs the same response. The way you speak to yourself should reflect your needs, not punish your past. Start by listening. Notice the tone of your inner voice. Is it gentle or sharp? Does it build or break? Does it reflect what you'd say to someone you love or something you've learned from fear? Awareness comes first. You can't change what you haven't noticed. Then ask, what is this voice trying to do? Many harsh thoughts started as protection. They try to push you into action, to prevent embarrassment, to keep you safe by making you small. Once you see that intention, you can choose a new form for it. You don't have to silence the message. You just speak it with more care. For example, instead of, "You always mess this up," you could say, "This is hard. You've struggled here before. Let's try something different this time." The meaning is still there, but the delivery doesn't shame you. It keeps the door open for action instead of closing it with judgment. This practice becomes a kind of inner parenting. You learn to speak to yourself the way a wise caretaker would. Firm when needed, tender when needed, but always rooted in respect. You stop abandoning yourself in difficulty. You begin to sound like someone you'd actually want to listen to. Over time, this voice changes how you move through your days. When a mistake happens, you don't collapse. You reflect. When fear arises, you don't mock yourself for feeling it. You acknowledge it and move gently. This doesn't mean you lose standards or motivation. It means your motivation stops coming from self-attack and starts coming from care. You also begin to let go of old scripts, phrases that were never yours but became part of your mental vocabulary. Things you heard growing up, things repeated by people who didn't know how to love gently. When those phrases come up, skillful means allows you to pause and rewrite. You ask, "Is this mine?" If not, you release it. You create new language, new patterns, new neural pathways that reflect your current truth, not someone else's history. The impact is subtle but deep. Your stress lessens. Your body feels safer. You're no longer bracing against your own inner voice. That safety creates capacity. You begin to try new things, not because you're trying to become someone else, but because it feels good to grow when you're not being punished for how long it takes. You start to view setbacks differently. Instead of labeling yourself a failure, you say, "This needs more time." Instead of giving up, you say, "We'll try again tomorrow." Instead of collapsing into "What's wrong with me?" you ask, "What support do I need right now?" These questions open space, and in that space, healing happens faster than judgment ever allowed. This way of speaking doesn't just change your relationship to yourself, it changes your relationship to others. You become less reactive because you've practiced compassion internally. You speak more carefully because you've learned the power of words. You stop needing to prove you're okay because you already feel held, even when you're not at your best. And yes, there will still be moments when the old voice returns, when you snap at yourself before you notice. That's not failure, that's habit. The work is not to be perfect. The work is to return, to shift back into kindness as soon as you remember. Each time you choose skillful language, you're not faking anything. You're practicing a new way of relating. You're teaching your mind to trust that change doesn't require cruelty, that accountability can live beside gentleness, that truth doesn't have to cut, it can cradle. Buddhist teachers often say the Dharma is a raft. It's not the truth for all time. It's a tool to get you across the river. Your self-talk can become that raft. A support, not a sentence. A way to cross the difficult waters of life with dignity intact. But the raft must fit your hands, your voice, your heart. That means you get to shape it, not based on ideals, based on usefulness, based on what allows you to breathe more easily, to stay with yourself more fully, to keep going even when things are hard. That's the essence of skillful means, wisdom that adapts to serve freedom, not static truth, living truth, spoken in your own language, at your own pace, in your own way. So ask yourself now, and again tomorrow, how do I want to speak to the person I live with every day? Me. What kind of voice helps me rise gently, not out of pressure, but out of presence? What words feel like hands, not weapons? Choose those words. Let them become habits. Let them replace the ones that hurt. Let them guide you not to some ideal self, but to the one who's already here, waiting to be spoken to with love. You do not need to earn that voice. You only need to choose it, again and again, until it sounds like home. Once you learn how to speak to yourself with skillful care, once your words begin to soften instead of wound, something else becomes possible. A kind of inner space where you are no longer chained to your last thought, your last mistake, your last version of yourself. You stop holding yourself hostage to who you were a few moments ago. You begin to notice a quiet truth rising from underneath it all. You are allowed to begin again. This is not just a comforting idea. It is a central teaching in Buddhism, the teaching of rebirth. And while often misunderstood as something that only happens between lifetimes, its real power is in how it applies to your life right now, not later, not after death, but in each breath, in each decision, in each time you pause and choose something different. Rebirth is not about becoming someone new. It's about releasing the version of you that no longer fits so that something more aligned can emerge. It's about remembering that your past is not a prison, that your patterns are not permanent, that the moment you decide to return to your center, you have already begun again. This teaching carries a hidden form of self-compassion, one that goes beyond soothing words or gentle tones. It is compassion expressed through permission, the permission to change, to grow, to not be frozen in your worst moment. It tells you that you are not your lowest point. You are not bound to the mistakes of the person you used to be. And even if you failed 100 times, this moment is still new. To live in alignment with this truth, you must let go of the idea that your identity is fixed. Buddhism teaches that there is no solid self, only a flowing process. The person you were a minute ago is already gone. Your thoughts, emotions, and intentions are always shifting. You are more like a river than a statue. Trying to freeze yourself into a single version only causes pain. The more you insist on being one way, the more you suffer when life moves you differently. Rebirth, as a metaphor, reminds you to loosen your grip. You start recognizing the subtle places where you cling, to an old story, to an old label, to a way of reacting that no longer serves. These forms of attachment are not just mental. They shape how you breathe, how you move, how you relate to others. They keep you reacting from the past instead of responding from the present. Each moment offers you a choice. You can replay the old tape, or you can step into what is real now. That choice is the doorway to rebirth. And you don't have to wait for some perfect condition to walk through it. You only have to notice when you're caught, and then pause. In that pause, a new life begins. This practice doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen. It means carrying it with wisdom instead of identity. It means looking at your pain, your failures, and your regrets with eyes that say, I understand how that happened, but it doesn't have to keep happening. I can meet this moment with something new, and when you forget, you don't fall back to zero. There is no scoreboard. You are not starting over. You are continuing. There's no shame in returning. The returning itself is the practice. Rebirth teaches you to let go without losing yourself. You're not discarding who you've been. You're integrating what you've learned. Each new beginning holds the memory of what came before, but it no longer has to be driven by it. This is what turns pain into wisdom, not time, but the willingness to meet the present without dragging your past assumptions into it. It's easy to think that change has to be dramatic, but the most powerful forms of rebirth are often small, choosing not to respond with the usual irritation, breathing through an impulse instead of obeying it, allowing yourself to rest without needing to earn it. These are quiet revolutions, and each time you choose one, you dissolve a layer of old identity. This process is not linear. Some days you'll feel open and free. Other days, the past will pull hard. But rebirth doesn't depend on constant progress. It depends on willingness. A willingness to see when you're caught and to return with gentleness. A willingness to say again and again, I can begin here. This also changes how you view your emotions. You stop treating them as permanent realities. You realize that even the most overwhelming feelings pass, and that even when they return, they're not identical. Your relationship to them has shifted. That shift is your rebirth, not in theory, but in experience. Over time, you learn how to recognize the signals. You know the feeling of being trapped in an old pattern. You sense the tightening, the old narrative pulling you back, and instead of collapsing into it, you pause, you breathe, you ask, what if this moment is new? What if I don't have to respond the same way? This isn't denial, it's mindfulness. It's remembering that clinging to a fixed story of yourself is its own kind of suffering. And that freedom lies not in changing who you are, but in allowing who you are to evolve. When you hold this view, failure becomes less terrifying. You're not afraid of falling short because you know it doesn't define you. You can meet your missteps with compassion instead of judgment. You learn from them, not because you fear punishment, but because you value your growth. This teaching also deepens your compassion for others. You stop expecting them to be the same person they were yesterday. You give them space to evolve, to learn, to return differently. You stop defining people by their mistakes, and you start relating to who they are becoming, not just who they've been. That shift opens your heart in ways you didn't expect. You become less reactive, less defensive, more curious, more patient, because you trust that everyone is in process, including you, and in that shared understanding, connection becomes real. You no longer need people to be perfect. You don't even need yourself to be. You just need presence and the willingness to begin again. This also softens how you approach goals. You may still set intentions, but you stop tying your worth to outcomes. You allow the path to twist. You adjust when needed. You stop seeing setbacks as signs you're not meant to continue. Instead, you see them as moments to renew your direction, to begin again, not with pressure, but with purpose. Even your relationship to time changes. You stop rushing. You stop measuring your life in milestones. You start meeting each day as its own chapter. Each morning, a rebirth. Each decision, a chance to come home. You're not constantly reinventing yourself. You're deepening into yourself. Letting what no longer fits fall away. Letting what's true rise without force. And when you feel stuck, when the old story pulls heavy, remember, the path forward is always through awareness. Awareness of what you're feeling. Awareness of what you're repeating. Awareness of the moment you decide to come back. This returning is not weakness. It's the strongest thing you can do, to come back after falling, to rise after breaking, to speak kindly to yourself after speaking harshly. These are acts of courage. These are your real beginnings. You don't need permission to start over. You don't need to wait for a sign. The sign is your breath. The sign is your willingness. The sign is the part of you that's still listening, still learning, still open to more. Let this be enough. Let it be the foundation, not because it's loud, not because it's perfect, but because it's honest, and because it's yours. You don't have to finish the story you were told. You can write new lines. You can begin again, not once, but as many times as you need. Not someday, now. Right now, without changing anything else, you can choose presence. You can drop the weight. You can remember that freedom isn't something you achieve, it's something you allow. Let that truth guide you forward. Let it remind you that every moment is a doorway, every breath is an offering, and every return is a blessing you don't have to earn. You are not behind, you are not late, you are exactly where the next beginning begins. Beginning again isn't only about moving forward. Sometimes it's about turning around and seeing your past with new eyes. The choice to step into the present moment, free of shame and self-punishment, often depends on how gently you can look at where you've been. You cannot carry yourself with care if you still believe you are guilty for not knowing what you didn't yet understand. And this is where the teaching of right view becomes essential. Right view is the first element of the Eightfold Path. It forms the foundation for all the other practices in Buddhism. But it isn't just about beliefs or opinions. It's about seeing clearly. It's about understanding how life actually works, not how we've been conditioned to think it does. It's not a rule to follow. It's a way to see yourself and everything else through the lens of wisdom and compassion. When you carry right view, you stop seeing yourself as a fixed person who made a fixed mistake. You begin to recognize that every action, every choice, and every reaction arose under specific causes and conditions. The Buddhist understanding of karma is not about punishment. It's not a cosmic revenge system. Karma is cause and effect, nothing more and nothing less. And when you truly understand it, you begin to see that your past behavior was never isolated. It was influenced. It was shaped. It was part of a larger network of experiences, fears, habits, and unconscious survival strategies. This does not excuse harm, but it explains it. And when you can explain something without blaming, you open the door to healing. You didn't fail because you were broken. You reacted from pain or confusion or fear or habit. That's not weakness. That's conditioning. When you see this clearly, you begin to hold yourself differently. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What was happening around me? What was happening inside of me? What didn't I know yet?" This isn't a bypass of accountability. This is the kind of understanding that makes real growth possible. You're not erasing the past. You're seeing it with depth. You're remembering that your story didn't begin in the moment you made a poor choice. It began long before, in the places you were shaped, in the emotions you didn't yet have the tools to hold. Right view teaches you that you are not separate from the causes that led to your pain, and that realization brings a softness. You start realizing that the version of you who said the wrong thing, who stayed too long, who walked away too soon, that version was doing the best they could with what they had. Even when it wasn't enough, even when it caused harm. That best may have been limited, but it was still the best available in that moment. We are taught to believe that we should have known better, but knowing better only happens when the conditions for knowing arise, and sometimes those conditions come later. That's not failure, that's development. That's the unfolding of wisdom over time. Right view helps you stop seeing your life in terms of verdicts. It replaces judgment with understanding. It allows you to look at your patterns with curiosity instead of shame. It reminds you that behavior can be harmful without your identity being harmful. That's the crucial difference. You are not your worst action. You are the awareness that sees it now, that wants to do differently, that's willing to begin again. And in that recognition is a deep kind of innocence. Not the kind that denies responsibility, but the kind that remembers your humanity. The kind that sees the child underneath the adult behavior, the confusion underneath the reaction, the longing underneath the silence. When you see that clearly, you start treating your memories differently. You stop stabbing yourself with them. You begin to hold them like an old photograph. This was me, but it is not all of me. That version of me was still learning. That version of me needed help. That version of me is not who I am now. This is not a mental trick. It's an honest practice. Right view teaches you to include interdependence in your understanding, which means nothing you've done happened in a vacuum. Every mistake had a context. Every reaction had a trigger. Every choice had a history. When you bring that awareness to your reflections, you make space for forgiveness. Not because you're ignoring harm, but because you are finally seeing the full picture. And from that picture, compassion becomes not just possible, but necessary. You don't have to rewrite the past to accept it. You only have to widen the lens, to hold both your action and the ignorance that fueled it, to remember that the person who made those decisions had not yet arrived at the clarity you have now. And that clarity was not stolen. It was built moment by moment, through experience, through reflection, through pain. This is how innocence returns, not through pretending you never fell, but through understanding why you did. It also softens the way you see others. The more you practice right view toward yourself, the more difficult it becomes to hold others in rigid roles. you begin to see that they, too, are caught in their own webs of habit and confusion. You begin to understand that people are not simply good or bad, they are in process. They are living through layers of causes you will never fully see. This doesn't mean you excuse everything. It means you stop simplifying everything. You stop needing to dehumanize others to understand them. You stop needing to dehumanize yourself too. Right view brings you into a new kind of honesty, one that includes nuance, one that allows you to say, yes, I was wrong, and yes, I was still doing my best at that time. Yes, I hurt someone, and yes, I can grow from it. Yes, I regret it. And yes, I can forgive the version of me who didn't know how else to be. That forgiveness becomes your foundation, not as an escape from consequences, but as a path to truth. You start speaking to yourself in language that reflects this understanding. You stop calling yourself names. You stop using your past as proof that you don't deserve peace. You begin to live from a deeper place, one where wisdom doesn't attack, where clarity doesn't criticize, where your growth is not fueled by guilt, but by insight. This is not always easy. Old shame runs deep. It's sticky. It tries to convince you that unless you hold on to it, you're not taking responsibility. But shame is not responsibility. Shame is paralysis. It keeps you frozen in identity instead of moving through behavior. Right view helps you see this. It helps you understand that real responsibility includes seeing your full context. And from that place, you begin to respond, not from fear, but from understanding. Not from self-hate, but from love. Love that says, you've been through enough. You've punished yourself enough. Now is the time to begin treating your past with respect, not rejection. You are not being asked to be perfect. You are being asked to be honest. Honest enough to say, I didn't know then what I know now. Honest enough to say, I see it clearly now, and I can choose something else. This is right view in action. Not a belief system, but a practice of seeing. Seeing yourself fully and still choosing compassion. Seeing your history clearly and still choosing to walk forward with care. The more you live from this place, the more peace becomes possible, not because your past disappears, but because it no longer defines you. You are no longer clinging to the idea that your worth depends on never having messed up. You know better now. And because you know better, you do better, not to prove your value, but because you understand it. Let that be enough. Let that be the light that guides you now. The light that says, you are not who you were. You are the one who sees. And in that seeing, you are already free. When you learn to view your past through a wider lens, when you stop reducing yourself to a mistake or a single version of who you were, something begins to soften. You start creating space between what happened and who you believe you are. That space is the beginning of real freedom. But for many, even with forgiveness and compassion, there's still a lingering tension. The constant pressure to maintain an image, to get everything right, to be consistent, impressive, flawless. It clings to you quietly, convincing you that if you could just be a little more perfect, everything would finally feel okay. This is where the teaching of anatta, non-self, offers something deeply liberating. Non-self doesn't mean you don't exist. It means that the solid, permanent identity you cling to, the one you defend, manage, and shape every day, is not as real as it feels. According to the Buddha, what we call self is actually a collection of constantly changing processes, thoughts, feelings, perceptions, memories, body sensations. None of them stay the same. None of them define you. There is no fixed, unchanging you behind it all. To understand this is to loosen the grip of perfectionism at its root. Perfectionism is not just about high standards, it is about identity. It comes from the belief that there is a fixed me that must live up to a fixed idea of what good, strong, worthy, or successful looks like. And when reality doesn't match that idea, suffering begins. You start comparing, judging, editing your behavior to fit the image. You begin living from performance instead of presence. You measure your value by how well you keep up the role. But when you look deeper through the lens of anatta, the pressure begins to break down. Because if there is no permanent self, then who exactly are you trying to perfect? Which version are you trying to protect? You realize that every identity you've clung to, whether it's the high achiever, the calm one, the helper, the one who always has it together, is just a temporary construction, useful at times, but not ultimate. And if it's not ultimate, it doesn't need to be defended. You can let it shift. You can let yourself change. This doesn't mean you lose your personality. It means your personality stops being a prison. It becomes more fluid, more natural, more responsive to the moment rather than stuck in repetition. You start acting not from who you think you should be, but from what is needed now. Perfectionism depends on a tight self-concept. It says, "This is who I am, and I must maintain this image at all costs." But anatta allows you to see that there is no fixed I that must be protected, only a process that unfolds moment by moment, depending on causes and conditions. This understanding allows for ease, for flexibility, for rest. You begin to relate differently to failure. Instead of seeing it as an attack on your identity, you see it as part of the flow, something that arose and will pass. You don't collapse into shame because you no longer believe that one action defines you. You see clearly that just as thoughts come and go, so too do mistakes, so too does success. Everything is temporary, so nothing has to be perfect. Even your accomplishments begin to carry a lighter weight. You no longer need them to prove your worth. You can still work hard, you can still create, but the energy behind your effort changes. It's no longer rooted in fear of being less than. It's rooted in curiosity, service, expression. The tension leaves, the joy returns. This view also helps with anxiety. Much of our anxiety comes from a fear of how we are perceived, of how our self-image holds up under pressure. But if there is no fixed self to defend, then the stakes lower. You can show up imperfectly. You can change your mind. You can be misunderstood and still be okay. You no longer have to constantly scan and correct. You no longer have to live in hyper-awareness of how you're being seen. You also stop over-identifying with your roles. The role of the caregiver, the leader, the peacemaker, the student. These are functions, not fixed identities. You play them as needed, but you're not stuck in them. This prevents burnout. It gives you permission to be whole beyond your usefulness to others. One of the most healing parts of anatta is that it frees you from inner conflict. So often, we divide ourselves into parts: the good part, the bad part, the motivated part, the tired part. We judge ourselves based on which part is dominant. But if the self is not fixed, then all of these parts are just temporary patterns. You don't have to fight one to strengthen another. You just notice, allow, and respond wisely. No inner war is needed. This brings a new level of self-acceptance, not because you've perfected your identity, but because you've stopped clinging to it. The pressure lifts. You are not required to be consistent with yesterday's version of you. You are not required to live up to a label you once chose. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to contradict old stories. The belief in a solid self creates a loop. You define yourself, then fear betraying that definition. But when you see through it, your freedom expands. You're no longer stuck trying to be the same person every day. You start living more honestly, more in tune with what's true in the moment, not what matches the past. This shift also improves how you handle praise and criticism. When someone praises you, you don't have to inflate your ego to hold it. When someone criticizes you, you don't have to collapse in defense. You begin to hear feedback as information, not identity. Helpful, but not defining. Even in relationships, anatta brings relief. You stop needing to control how others see you. You become less reactive when someone challenges your image. You become more available for connection because you're no longer preoccupied with presentation. And in solitude, something even more important begins to grow. You stop being afraid of your own inner world. You no longer need to fix everything that arises. You stop demanding that your thoughts always be noble, that your emotions always be calm, that your path always be clear. You make peace with change. You make peace with contradiction. Anatta isn't a cold idea. It's an invitation to rest, to stop trying to perfect a self that was never fixed to begin with. It's a return to fluidity, to openness, to the living truth that you are not a thing, but a process, not a label, but a life unfolding. This understanding deepens over time. Sometimes it brings immediate release. Other times, it's subtle. But the more you practice seeing through the illusion of a solid self, the less you suffer when that illusion cracks. You no longer need to hold everything together. You just show up, honestly, lightly, fully. Let this be your relief. You don't need to manage every impression. You don't need to achieve your way into belonging. You don't need to hold your identity in place. You are already part of the flow, already valid, already free to stop chasing perfection and start living what's real. So let the image fade, let the pressure go, let the performance soften. There is nothing missing in what you are, only more to meet. Only more to allow, only more to release. Letting go of the fixed idea of who you are doesn't make you less responsible. It makes you more free. Without the pressure to prove yourself, without the weight of perfection on your shoulders, something unexpected begins to rise from within. A quiet strength. The kind that doesn't come from having all the answers, but from being willing to show up anyway. Not because you have to earn your worth, but because something in you knows that showing up with an open heart still matters. That kind of strength is what the Bodhisattva path is really about. In Buddhist tradition, a Bodhisattva is someone who commits not just to their own awakening, but to helping all beings awaken. It is often described in big poetic language, vows to save all beings, to end all delusions, to master all teachings. And at first glance, it can sound overwhelming, as if it demands endless self-sacrifice, as if becoming a bodhisattva means putting yourself last, forever carrying the weight of the world. But that interpretation misses the heart of the vow. The bodhisattva path isn't about pressure, it's about courage. It's about remembering that compassion doesn't drain you, it expands you, that helping others is not a burden when it includes helping yourself. That care can be sustainable when it's rooted in balance, not burnout. When you hear the bodhisattva vows, they might feel impossible. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. But these are not literal tasks. They are expressions of intention. They point to a heart that refuses to shut down, even in the face of impossibility. A heart that says, even if I cannot fix everything, I will not give up trying to meet it with compassion. That spirit of the vow is not external. It's internal. You're not promising to solve the world. You're promising not to abandon your ability to care. And that care must begin with you. The bodhisattva path, if lived correctly, never leaves you behind. It includes your pain, your healing, your limitations, your needs. It does not require martyrdom. It requires presence. Many people hear teachings on compassion and interpret them as instructions to forget themselves, to serve others at any cost. But Buddhism never asks for that. True compassion is not self-neglect. It's about widening the circle, bringing yourself into the same field of care you offer to others. When you walk the bodhisattva path, your courage comes from love, not from pushing. You learn to meet suffering without flinching, including your own. You learn that turning toward pain, yours or another's, doesn't mean drowning in it. It means holding it without turning to blame, without needing to escape, without hardening your heart. This kind of courage is not dramatic. It's quiet. It's the courage to rest when you're tired, knowing that your well-being matters. It's the courage to tell the truth, even when it's messy. It's the courage to be kind to someone who is difficult without pretending that harm is okay. It's the courage to be a safe place for someone else while still being honest about your own boundaries. The bodhisattva path also reminds you that your presence is enough. You don't need to fix everything to make a difference. Sometimes just being there, listening, staying open, that is the practice. And you can only do that when you're not trying to prove yourself through service. When your acts of care come from wholeness, not guilt. This vow, then, is not a demand. It's an invitation to live in a way that honors your connection to others without erasing your own center. To show up again and again, even when it's hard, not because you have to, but because you can, because there's strength in remembering you are not separate. That's what gives the bodhisattva vow its energy. Not obligation, love, not pressure, trust, not a checklist, but a direction. And that direction includes your healing, your rest, your joy. Because how can you help others be free if you keep yourself in chains? You begin to see that courage is not about being fearless. It's about being afraid and still showing up, still breathing, still choosing compassion over withdrawal, still believing that even your smallest effort matters, and not just for others, but for you. Every time you keep your heart open, even slightly, you are returning to the vow. The vow is not something you take once. It's something you renew constantly, not with words, but with action, with how you treat people, with how you forgive yourself, with how you return to kindness after forgetting it. Every act of compassion, no matter how small, fulfills the vow. And this doesn't require perfection. In fact, your imperfections are part of what make you relatable. Your flaws don't disqualify you. They connect you. They remind you what it feels like to struggle, to fall short, to hope for understanding. That memory becomes your medicine. You carry it not as shame, but as fuel, as something that lets you reach others not from above, but from beside. This path also protects you from the illusion of isolation. It reminds you that your life is part of a larger network, that your healing ripples out, that your softness gives others permission to soften, that your willingness to be kind, even when it's hard, plants seeds in places you may never see, but they grow anyway. You stop measuring your worth by how much you can do and start measuring it by how often you can return. Return to presence. Return to care. Return to the vow, not because it's required, but because it feels right. And when you forget the vow, when you get tired or impatient or reactive, you don't punish yourself. You simply notice and begin again. Because even the moment of forgetting is part of the path. Even the lapse is an opportunity to remember. This is how the vow strengthens you. It doesn't create pressure. It creates direction. You are not here to carry the world. You are here to respond to it, gently, clearly, and with the wisdom that your own needs matter too. So, if you've ever felt that being spiritual means being selfless to the point of depletion, this path offers another way, a way that includes you, a way that does not split you into either giving or receiving, but shows you that they are the same movement, that caring for yourself is not separate from compassion. It is the root of it. Because what the world needs most is not another person running on empty. It needs people who are grounded, people who care with boundaries, who love with wisdom, who know how to stay centered while still reaching out. And that is what the Bodhisattva vow cultivates. Not sacrifice, stability, not pressure, devotion, not burnout, bravery. So let the vow live in you, not as weight, but as a light. Let it guide your choices, not because you must, but because you can. And let it include every part of you, especially the part still learning to feel worthy of care. This is the courage that changes lives, not by force, but by presence, not by pressure, but by the quiet strength of returning to love, again and again. When you begin to live with a vow that includes your own well-being, when compassion becomes a source of stability instead of pressure, something subtle begins to shift in how you experience your inner life. You stop interpreting every emotion as a personal failure. You stop taking your moods as proof of weakness. You begin to understand that pain, anger, and sadness are not enemies to be defeated, but energies to be understood. This shift leads to one of the most liberating insights in Buddhist psychology, the realization that emotions are not personal. The Abhidhamma, one of the foundational frameworks of Buddhist thought, offers a precise and liberating view of the mind and its movements. It doesn't judge experience, it examines it with clarity and care. From this perspective, emotions are not seen as permanent parts of your identity. They are events, conditions that arise, stay for a time, and then dissolve. They are not you. They happen in you, but they are not who you are. This understanding is essential for those struggling with self-loathing. Because when you mistake emotion for identity, you suffer twice. First, from the feeling itself, and then from the belief that the feeling says something fixed about your worth. You feel anxious, and then believe you are an anxious person. You feel sad, and then believe something is wrong with you. You feel rage, and then fear you are broken. But the Abhidhamma teaches you to observe more deeply, to see that what you call sadness or anger is made up of many momentary mental factors, each arising due to specific conditions and each vanishing the moment those conditions shift. This doesn't remove responsibility, but it removes shame. You begin to understand that your inner world is not a reflection of your value. It is a field of experience, unfolding according to natural laws. Just as clouds gather and pass in the sky, emotions gather and pass through the mind. No storm means the sky has failed. No wave means the ocean is broken. In Abhidhamma analysis, the mind is not a single thing. It is a continuous stream of mental events, each conditioned by what came before. Each mind moment is shaped by contact, attention, perception, feeling tone, and volition. What this means is that what you experience is not the product of a solid self, but the result of ever-shifting conditions. When you start to see your feelings in this way, something tight in you starts to loosen. You stop saying, "Why am I like this?" and instead ask, "What is this moment made of?" You become curious. Instead of collapsing into identification, you begin to investigate. What triggered this? What supports it? What weakens it? What helps it pass? These questions turn your suffering into wisdom. They turn reactivity into mindfulness. The Abhidhamma also teaches that feelings themselves are ethically neutral. Pain is not bad. Pleasure is not good. What matters is how you respond. This is revolutionary. It means you can feel sadness without believing you have failed. You can feel fear without adding a story of inadequacy. You can feel anger without assuming you are a cruel person. You start to understand that emotions are not personal verdicts. They are part of the human condition. They arise due to causes. Some causes are internal. Others are external. Some are present. Others are echoes from the past. But none of them define your core. They are patterns, not prisons. This view allows you to practice true patience. Not the kind that waits impatiently for the emotion to leave, but the kind that allows it to fully unfold without resistance, because you know it will pass, and because you know it is not yours in the possessive sense, it is just here. The Abhidhamma goes even further, breaking down emotions into their constituent factors. For example, anger is not one thing. It is a combination of unpleasant feeling, aversion, narrowed attention, often a sense of threat, and sometimes craving for control. When you see this clearly, anger becomes less overwhelming. It loses its shape as a solid monster and becomes a cluster of momentary mental events. You can intervene, not by repressing, but by shifting the conditions. You can breathe. You can open attention. You can challenge the underlying perception. You can step out of the loop. This analysis also applies to sadness, shame, anxiety, and guilt. None of these are singular. They are built from layers. Sensations in the body, memories, beliefs, tension, all arising and passing. When you watch them closely, you begin to trust that they don't last. You stop feeding them. You stop looping them. You let them be what they are, events, not identities. And when you feel something beautiful, peace, compassion, joy, you hold it with the same clarity. You don't cling. You don't assume it proves anything about you. You simply appreciate it, knowing it too will change. This helps you stay balanced. You don't ride your emotions like a roller coaster. You observe them like waves on a sea you can learn to navigate. Another key aspect of the Abhidhamma is that it treats the mind with precision, not sentiment. It doesn't ask you to like your emotions. It asks you to understand them. It invites you to build wisdom, not drama. And in doing so, it gives you tools to live with more stability. You begin to make different choices. You stop reacting out of panic. You start choosing actions based on clarity. You stop defining yourself by how you feel and start measuring growth by how you respond. This is maturity, not emotional suppression, but emotional integration. And perhaps most healing of all, this view dissolves the illusion of isolation. You stop believing that your struggles mean something is wrong with you. You understand that everyone is experiencing their own stream of mind moments. That what feels so personal is actually universal. You are not alone in your emotions. You are part of a shared reality, unfolding in different forms for everyone. This opens the door to compassion, first for yourself, then for others. You stop expecting yourself to be calm all the time. You stop expecting others to never react. You start accepting the imperfection of emotional life, not as failure, but as nature. You also stop trying to manage emotion with force. You understand that control is not freedom. Observation is. When you watch the mind without grasping, without pushing, without identifying, it begins to settle on its own, like stirred water that slowly becomes clear. This is not about becoming detached. It's about becoming wise, feeling everything, but not being ruled by it, responding with care, but not being dragged under, living with emotion, but no longer believing that emotion is the truth of who you are. With time, this view becomes second nature. You feel something rise and you pause. You notice its texture. You watch its movement. You let it peak. You feel it start to pass. You breathe. You return. No story needed. No guilt. No shame. Just presence. And in that presence, your self-respect deepens, because you are no longer at war with your own experience. You are no longer building identity around pain. You are no longer shrinking yourself to match your moods. You are simply seeing clearly, and that clarity is the beginning of peace. Let that peace stay with you. Let it shape how you move through the day. Let it remind you that every feeling is a visitor, and you, grounded in awareness, are the space they pass through. Not a problem to fix, not a character to maintain, just awareness, just this moment. And the freedom that comes with knowing. You are not your emotions. You are the one who watches them pass. Watching emotions pass without identifying with them brings immense relief. You no longer believe that every rising wave is yours to hold forever. You no longer fear your own feelings as if they are reflections of who you are. But even as you learn to meet your mind with space and clarity, there is still one place where shame often hides the deepest: the body. Not the idea of the body, not your thoughts about it, but the lived, felt experience of being in it. Shame does not only live in your thoughts. It settles in your posture, your breath, your shoulders, your belly, your voice, It shows up in how you move through space. It shapes your presence. It teaches you to shrink, to hide, to tighten, to disappear. And no matter how many times you tell yourself you're okay, if your body still believes it is not safe to exist fully, the message doesn't land. This is why mindfulness of the body is not optional. It is essential. Mindfulness of the body isn't about analyzing it or judging it. It's not about controlling your weight or your performance or your flexibility. It's about noticing, gently, where life is happening inside you, where breath moves, where tension lingers, where sensation arises and fades. It is the practice of coming back to this moment through the vehicle of your own aliveness. This kind of awareness begins with attention. Bringing your awareness to the breath, not to manipulate it, but to feel it. Noticing where it goes, where it gets stuck, where it moves freely. You are not forcing anything. You are meeting what is already there. The breath doesn't need to be deep or perfect. It only needs to be noticed. And as you stay with the breath, you start noticing more. The way your chest lifts or stays collapsed, the tension in your jaw, the curl in your spine. These are not mistakes. They are clues. They are the physical shapes your shame has taken over time, shapes you've learned to carry without even realizing it, shapes that once kept you safe. But now they are ready to be seen. As you bring mindfulness to your posture, your body slowly learns that it doesn't have to hide anymore, that it doesn't have to clench in defense, that it doesn't have to bow in apology. You begin to uncurl, not forcefully, gently, through presence. Every time you sit with your body without judgment, you're sending a message deeper than thought. You belong here. You're allowed to take up space. You are not wrong for existing. This is the medicine for shame. Not affirmation alone, not analysis, but direct contact. Returning again and again to your breath, to your bones, to your skin, and offering it all your attention, not with criticism, but with care. Mindfulness of the body is not abstract. It is practical. You might begin by sitting and simply noticing the weight of your body on the ground. You might place a hand over your chest and feel the rhythm beneath it. You might walk slowly, feeling your feet touch the earth. Each of these practices is an act of repair. Each one says, I am here. I feel this. I am willing to be with myself. This presence begins to untangle old stories, stories that told you your body was too much or not enough, stories that said you had to earn your right to be seen, stories that taught you to disconnect in order to survive. You do not need to erase those stories. You need only to stop believing them. As you return to the body, you begin to build trust. Not all at once, but steadily. Trust that your sensations won't overwhelm you, that your emotions can move without destroying you, that you can feel and still be safe. This trust is not a concept, it is embodied. It is felt in the calmness that returns after a long exhale, in the steadiness of your feet when you walk with attention, in the openness of your chest when you no longer brace against the world. The body also teaches you about boundaries. It tells you when you've said yes too often, when you've abandoned your needs to avoid conflict, when you're pushing past your limits in order to please. These messages do not come in words, they come in tightness, fatigue, headaches, restlessness. Learning to listen to these signals is how you start to care for yourself in real time. And when shame rises again, as it will, you bring it into the body too. You don't try to push it away. You notice how it feels, where it sits, what it does to your breath, what it does to your shoulders. You offer attention, not analysis. You stay close, not distant, and slowly, shame loses its solidity. It becomes just another sensation, just another visitor, not a sentence, not a truth. Mindfulness of the body also helps you return to rhythm, the natural rhythm of breath, of heartbeat, of movement. Shame interrupts this rhythm. It makes you stiff. It makes you rush or freeze. Returning to rhythm brings you back into harmony. It reminds you that you are not separate from life. You are part of something flowing, breathing, alive. And in that flow, dignity returns. Not the kind of dignity that comes from achievement or appearance, but the kind that comes from presence, from knowing, without needing proof, that you are whole, that your body is not a mistake, that your existence is not a problem to solve. You stop needing your body to look a certain way. You start caring about how it feels, how it supports you, how it carries memory, wisdom, and truth. You start treating it like something sacred, not because it fits an ideal, but because it is where your life is happening. This changes your choices. You eat not to punish or reward yourself, but to nourish. You move not to prove, but to feel. You rest not out of laziness, but out of respect. Every action becomes an expression of care. You also become more sensitive to joy, because joy too lives in the body, in warmth, in softness, in movement. When you are disconnected from your body, joy becomes an idea. When you are present in your body, joy becomes a sensation, real, tangible, free. The more you practice this, the more you realize you were never broken. You were simply disconnected. The parts of you that felt unworthy were calling not for correction, but for connection. And mindfulness of the body is how that connection begins. It doesn't matter how many times you've left yourself. What matters is your willingness to return, to breathe, to feel, to stay. And each time you do, you are rewriting something inside. You are saying, I will no longer abandon myself to please others. I will no longer judge my worth by how small I can make myself. I will no longer turn away from pain when presence is what's needed. This is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to who you've always been underneath the shame. Someone worthy of care, someone whole in their aliveness, someone allowed to stand tall, breathe deeply, and feel at home in their own skin. Let this be your practice, not just today, but every day. Come back to the breath. Come back to the posture. Come back to the body, with kindness, with respect, with the quiet dignity of someone who is no longer willing to treat their presence as a problem, because this body, your body, is not just a vessel. It is the very place where healing begins. When you finally stop turning away from your body, when you let it speak through breath, posture, stillness, what you begin to find is not just comfort, but clarity. You stop needing to explain every feeling. You stop needing to justify your right to heal. But just as the body softens, the mind may still try to pull you back into old habits, especially one habit in particular, the need to investigate yourself endlessly, to dissect every flaw, to figure out exactly what is wrong with you before you believe you're allowed to move forward. This is where one of the Buddha's most powerful teachings becomes essential. The parable of the poisoned arrow begins with a simple but profound image. A man is shot with an arrow, but instead of pulling it out, he refuses medical attention until he knows who shot it, what the weapon was made of, where the attacker came from, what type of bow they used, and every other imaginable detail. While he wastes time demanding answers, the poison spreads, and he dies. Not because the wound was fatal, but because he wouldn't let it be treated until his questions were answered. This story isn't about an actual arrow. It's about how we suffer. Many of us do this every day. We are hurting, but instead of addressing the pain directly, we delay healing. We get lost in analysis. We keep asking, why am I like this? Where did it come from? Who's to blame? What childhood event started it? Am I permanently damaged? Should I be further along by now? What does this say about me? These questions are not wrong, but they often don't help, especially when they become obsessive, especially when they replace healing with explanation, especially when they distract us from what is needed most: care. The Buddha wasn't against understanding the mind, but he was deeply focused on suffering and its end. He taught that the goal is not to become a perfect version of yourself with no flaws, no confusion, and no emotional history. The goal is to stop suffering unnecessarily, to relieve what can be relieved, and to do so without delay. When you overinvest in understanding what caused your pain before you're willing to soften toward it, you delay healing, sometimes endlessly. You may think, if I can just understand why I feel this way, then I'll be able to let go. But often it works the other way. Letting go of the need to understand fully is what allows the feeling to move. Because trying to understand everything is exhausting. And even if you find the answer, it rarely changes how much you hurt. The poisoned arrow metaphor teaches us to shift our focus, not from curiosity to denial, but from obsession to response, from looping to presence, from analysis to care. You do not need a complete explanation of your suffering to begin addressing it. You only need to acknowledge what hurts and meet it with what it needs. This doesn't mean you stop reflecting. It means you reflect wisely. You stop confusing analysis with progress. You stop thinking that insight alone is healing. Healing is in the attention you give to the wound, not just in naming where it came from. And more often than not, our obsession with why is driven by fear. The fear that maybe the pain is our fault, that if we can just find the root cause, we can fix ourselves once and for all. That maybe, if we're honest, we're too broken to be whole, and so we search. We pick at old memories, we interrogate our emotions, we hold ourselves in limbo until the mystery is solved. But there is another way. You can feel pain without investigating your entire past. You can feel sadness without needing to trace its origin. You can meet fear in the body, in the breath, in sensation, without turning it into a problem to solve. You can stop asking why long enough to ask something more useful. What is needed right now? That question breaks the cycle. It opens the space to tend rather than analyze. It shifts you from self-interrogation to self-compassion. Many spiritual paths emphasize knowing yourself, but Buddhism adds a subtle and vital layer. Know yourself enough to suffer less. not to build a perfect self-narrative, not to find a singular answer to your wounds, but to meet this moment wisely, skillfully, and with heart. What happens when you stop picking at the arrow and start treating the wound? What happens when you stop asking what your pain says about your worth and instead focus on what it says about your needs? You begin to heal, not quickly, not completely, but honestly, gently, and without the constant pressure to understand everything before you're allowed to feel better. This is what makes the parable so enduring. It's a teaching on simplicity, not as avoidance, but as compassion. Your pain is real, but it does not need to be over-explained to be addressed. It needs attention. It needs presence. It needs rest. When you stop trying to solve yourself like a problem, you begin to see what you've missed. That many of your so-called flaws were strategies, adaptations, creative attempts at safety. They weren't wrong. They were responses to past conditions, and they don't need to be dissected to be released. They need to be honored and then softened. This doesn't mean insight is useless. It means it's not enough. And when it becomes a barrier to care, it needs to be put down. This applies to your relationships too. You may be tempted to explain others' behaviors before setting boundaries. You may want to understand their pain before protecting your peace, but the arrow is still there, and waiting for the full story can be its own form of suffering. Sometimes healing is messy. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it starts when you say, "This hurts, and I don't need to know why before I start holding it." You learn to stop feeding the belief that you are a puzzle to solve. You are not a mystery that needs to be cracked. You are not a case study. You are a human being with a nervous system, a memory, a body, and a heart. And you are allowed to feel without knowing. You are allowed to sit in discomfort without dissecting it. You are allowed to soothe pain without assigning it meaning. You are allowed to experience your life without turning every ache into a story. And when the mind wants to spiral, when it says you can't move forward without one more answer, you return to the body. You return to the breath. You return to what you can actually feel and what you can actually do. You choose presence over explanation, not because you're ignoring your history, but because you're no longer held hostage by it. This is how the arrow comes out, not with a final answer, but with a shift in attention. Let that be your practice, not to fix yourself, not to finish the story, but to care for what hurts now. Not with theories, with tenderness. You've spent enough time explaining your pain. Now is the time to offer it a way forward. To heal where you are, not just where you've been, and to let that be enough. After you stop analyzing your pain like a puzzle, after you put down the constant need to explain yourself and begin treating your wounds directly, what you may feel next is a kind of silence. A space that used to be filled with criticism, questioning, and noise becomes quiet. That quiet can feel unfamiliar. It might even feel lonely. For so long, you've lived with a mind full of judgment, doubt, and defense. And when you stop feeding those voices, what's left? This is the perfect moment to begin something new. Not another external fix, but an inner return. A return to the part of you that still remembers how to care. A return to inner community. In Buddhist practice, this is called Sangha. Traditionally, Sangha refers to the community of practitioners who support one another in walking the path. It's one of the three jewels you take refuge in: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Each represents a different kind of strength, awakening, truth, and connection. But Sangha is often misunderstood as something only external. A monastery, a retreat group, a circle of teachers or fellow seekers, those are important. But they are not the only Sangha available to you. There is also the Sangha within. This is not a metaphor, it's a living truth. Inside you are many voices, many parts, many layers of memory and insight. Some parts learned to survive, others learned to speak with kindness. Some protected you, some punished you. The Sangha within is the part of you that begins to reorganize this inner world, not by force, but by invitation. You begin to notice that not every thought deserves to lead. You begin to see that some voices, the ones that judge and shame, are not your only options. And slowly, you start to give more space to the voices inside that are wise, kind, clear, and steady. Taking refuge in the inner Sangha means choosing which voices you want to follow. It means listening more to the part of you that speaks from compassion than the one that speaks from fear. It means allowing the wiser aspects of your experience, your practice, your insights, your growth, to become louder than your self-doubt. This internal shift happens in small, consistent ways. When you feel shame rise, you might pause and ask, "Who inside me is speaking right now?" And you may realize it's a part that sounds like an old authority figure or a younger self frozen in pain. You do not have to silence that voice, but you also do not have to believe it. You can bring in another voice, a quieter one that says, "You are allowed to feel this and still be worthy." Every time you make that shift, you are building your inner Sangha. You are not just coping, you are creating a sanctuary, a space where your own inner wisdom is allowed to guide you. This doesn't mean the painful voices disappear, it means they no longer dominate. You begin to develop a relationship with the parts of you that hold clarity. The part that has sat through meditation, that has survived difficult days with gentleness, that knows how to breathe through overwhelm. You start letting that part speak more often. You return to it when the noise grows too loud. You trust it, even when it's quiet. The inner Sangha is not made of perfection. It's made of presence. You don't need flawless inner dialogue. You need honest support. A steady tone that says, "Come back, breathe, begin again." Sometimes you remember the voices of teachers or friends who spoke truth when you forgot it. Those voices can live inside you too. They don't need to be physically present to support you. Their words, their calm, their steadiness, it all becomes part of your inner landscape. This is not imagination. This is integration. When someone offers you real compassion, your nervous system remembers, and that memory can become a resource. It can become a voice inside that reminds you what safety feels like when you forget. As your inner Sangha grows stronger, something else happens. You stop abandoning yourself in moments of pain. You stop siding with your harshest thoughts. You begin to respond to difficulty with a kind of teamwork, not isolation, not attack, but support. That support can sound like many things. It might be the voice that says, "Of course this hurts, be gentle." It might be the one that says, "Let's take a breath," or "You've been here before and you know how to return." These are not empty affirmations. They are the language of refuge. And because they live inside you, they're always accessible. You don't have to wait for someone else to remind you of your worth. You don't have to rely on the approval of others to feel safe. You carry your Sangha within you wherever you go. This also changes how you relate to your past selves. You stop treating them as enemies. You begin to bring them into the circle too. The younger you who didn't know how to speak up. The scared you who coped in messy ways. The tired you who couldn't keep pretending to be fine. You don't reject them. You welcome them into the inner community with care. You say, "You did what you could. Let's move forward together." The Sangha within becomes a place of belonging. Not because everything is resolved, but because everything is welcome. You stop needing to exile parts of yourself just to function. You stop organizing your inner life around control. You start organizing it around care. And from this care, clarity grows. You begin to hear the difference between a fear-driven reaction and a grounded response. You recognize when your mind is spiraling, and instead of feeding it, you invite the voice of wisdom to speak. You shift the inner balance, and slowly your life begins to feel different, not because the world changed, but because your inner world is no longer ruled by fear alone. This shift also prepares you to offer real presence to others, not from emptiness, not from performance, but from fullness, from knowing what it feels like to be supported within. You become a safer space for those around you, because you are no longer running from yourself. You also stop pretending that independence means doing everything alone. Even inside you, healing is not solo work. It's relational. Your inner voices are always in conversation. Taking refuge in the Sangha within means choosing to build that conversation with care. It means asking, what helps me feel steady? What helps me return to truth? Which voices lift me and which ones need to soften? How can I meet all of me with more kindness? And in answering these questions, you build a home inside yourself, a place to rest, a place to regroup, a place where even on your worst days, you're not alone. This is what refuge really means. Not escape, but return. Not isolation, but connection to something real and kind and enduring. You do not need to wait for the perfect teacher or the perfect community to feel supported. You can begin now, by listening, by choosing, by building the voices inside that hold you with dignity. Let your inner Sangha speak louder than your shame. Let it grow. Let it hold you. Let it remind you, even in your darkest moments, that there is a part of you that knows how to return, and that part has never left. When you begin to build a reliable inner Sangha, when the harsh voices lose their grip and more supportive ones begin to speak with calm, something long buried starts to surface. Something soft, small, and deeply vulnerable. It's not weak. It's not broken. It's the part of you that needed love before you knew how to ask for it. The part that didn't get the presence it deserved. The one that still wonders if it's safe to be seen. This is where the Dharma becomes more than philosophy. It becomes parenting, not from someone else, from within. The Dharma is often described as the Buddha's teachings, the truth of how things are, the path to freedom. But on a deeper level, it can also be lived as the parent your younger self never had. not a parent in the traditional sense, but a way of relating. A steady, nurturing, wise presence that steps in when the original caretakers could not or did not know how. To see the Dharma this way is to let it become something deeply personal, not distant, not abstract. It's not just ideas on a page or a ritual passed down. It's the way you speak to yourself when you're in pain, the way you hold yourself in confusion, the way you respond to fear without scolding, the way you build trust with the most tender parts of your inner world. Your inner child may not trust you right away. That's okay. If it has learned that love means pressure or that mistakes equal punishment, it will take time. The Dharma doesn't rush. It shows up again and again without threat. Its kindness isn't conditional. It doesn't ask you to be productive to earn care. It offers presence because presence itself is healing. When that childlike part of you becomes activated, when you feel anxious, ashamed, or small, you can pause and ask, what would compassion do here? Not as a performance, but as a real response. What would love sound like if it wasn't rushed? What would safety feel like if it didn't depend on perfection? The teachings give you a structure, but it's not rigid. It's like a lap, a quiet space to return to when you forget who you are, when you're overwhelmed, when your old patterns start to rise, and all you want to do is run. The Dharma doesn't judge the urge to flee. It notices it. It says, you're scared. That's okay. I'm here. Reparenting through the Dharma means meeting your pain without labeling it as wrong. It means recognizing that the parts of you that still seek approval, still long to be chosen, still fear being left, those parts are not immature. They are simply young, and young does not mean unworthy. The Four Noble Truths become more than ideas. They become a way of holding. Suffering exists. That acknowledgement alone is revolutionary. You no longer have to pretend you're fine. You don't have to hide your pain to be included. The path begins in honesty. Then you recognize the cause of suffering, not your brokenness, but your clinging, your craving for love, for safety, for identity, for something stable. Craving itself is not shameful, it's human. And the Dharma sees it. It holds it. It says, yes, of course you wanted comfort. Of course you longed for someone to stay. You are not blamed for that longing. You are simply shown another way. The third truth offers relief. Suffering can end. You are not doomed to repeat every pattern. You are not sentenced to keep living from old wounds. The Dharma believes in your capacity to change, not through willpower alone, but through understanding, through compassion, through presence. And the fourth truth, there is a path, not a magical fix, a path with steps, with patience, with tools you can pick up when you're ready and put down when you're tired. The Eightfold Path becomes a guide, not a rule book. Right view reminds you to see your experience with softness. Right intention helps you orient toward what nourishes. Right speech, right action, and right livelihood become ways of treating yourself and others with less harm. Right effort reminds you that force isn't required. Right mindfulness teaches you to stay close. Right concentration shows you how to return. Each element becomes a gesture of care, a way to reparent the parts of you that didn't learn safety, not because they were incapable, but because no one modeled it. The Dharma becomes that model. Reparenting is not about replacing the past. It's about offering something new in the present. It's about becoming the steady presence your nervous system needed. It's how you slowly stop repeating the same internal punishments. How you stop responding to your own vulnerability with distance. When you fail, the Dharma doesn't say, "Try harder." It says, "Return gently." When you react, it doesn't say, "You should know better." It says, "You're learning." When you forget, it doesn't shame you. It waits, with open hands, with patience, with wisdom that never leaves when you fall apart. This kind of parenting doesn't happen overnight. It's not performative. It doesn't come with grand speeches or perfect rituals. It comes with moments, with how you breathe through shame, with how you notice your body tightening and offer it a little more room, with how you choose words that comfort instead of criticize. The Dharma becomes a dialogue, not between teacher and student, but between your past and your present, between what was missing and what is now possible, between fear and trust. And yes, sometimes that trust will feel fragile. You may wonder if it's too late to change how you relate to yourself. You may feel resistance. That resistance is part of the path. It's not a failure. It's a signal. It means you're stepping into something new. Your practice becomes the parent. Your breath becomes the lullaby. Your awareness becomes the safety net. Even the teachings on impermanence begin to nurture. They tell you that no feeling lasts forever, no panic, no shame, no despair. All of it passes. This brings safety, because what the inner child fears most is being stuck in pain forever. Impermanence says this too will change. The teachings on interdependence offer warmth. They show that nothing arises alone. Your behaviors didn't appear in a vacuum. They were shaped. You are not a mistake. You are a response to causes. And those causes can be understood, shifted, softened. This perspective helps you stop blaming yourself for what you learned in order to survive. And when you stop blaming, you can begin healing. You can offer the tenderness that was never offered to you. This isn't about idealizing childhood. It's about reclaiming it, not to relive it, but to restore it. To give the part of you that still feels small the right to be seen with love. Not with control, with understanding. Every time you return to your cushion, every time you pause before reacting, every time you speak to yourself with kindness, you are parenting, not as a role, but as a way of being. You are raising yourself again, not into who others wanted you to be, but into who you truly are when held with care. Let the Dharma be that care. Let it remind you that you're not too late to learn gentleness. You're not too far gone to trust. You're not too old to rewire what was taught in fear. Let this be the ground you walk on now, not firm because it never wobbles, but firm because it always welcomes you back. You are not doing this alone. You never were. The path has been here all along, quietly waiting to raise you with love. When you begin to reparent yourself with the gentleness of the Dharma, when you offer the kind of steady care you once longed for, something deeper begins to unfold. Your inner world stops feeling so overwhelming. Your emotions, once viewed as storms to be feared or fixed, begin to soften into something more understandable. But even with care and clarity, emotions still come. They still pull. They still shift rapidly, dragging you into highs and lows, confusion and exhaustion. What changes is how you navigate them. This is where Buddhist cosmology offers a powerful and surprisingly practical tool, not as a literal description of the afterlife, but as a map of the emotional terrain we all pass through, often daily. The 6 realms of samsara are not far-off dimensions. They are here. They are in you. And learning to recognize them gives you a new language for meeting your own mind with more wisdom, less judgment. The 6 realms include the God realm, demigod realm, human realm, animal realm, hungry ghost realm, and hell realm. Each one symbolizes a particular kind of mental and emotional state. You do not have to believe in rebirth to use this framework. You only have to be willing to look inward with honesty. Each realm reflects a mood, a worldview, a set of reactions that we cycle through when we are disconnected from presence. Take the God realm. This is the state of bliss, of comfort, of ease. Things are going well. There is pleasure. There is pride. But there is also ignorance. In this realm, we forget that change is inevitable. We cling to what we enjoy and resist seeing the suffering around us. We resist seeing that our joy, too, will fade. When you find yourself feeling untouchable, above others, or immune to discomfort, this may be the God realm. It is not wrong to feel good, but it is unwise to believe it will last forever. Then comes the demigod realm, marked by comparison, competition, and jealousy. This is the mental state of grasping for what others have, of needing to be seen as better, of constantly measuring yourself against those around you. Even success doesn't satisfy here, because the focus is not on what you have, but what you lack in comparison to someone else. In this realm, there's tension, even when things seem outwardly fine. Recognition of this state helps you pause the cycle of reaching. It lets you ask, what would it feel like to want less? To celebrate without envy. The human realm is considered the most balanced. It includes both suffering and joy. It allows for reflection, for choice, for practice. It is the state where you are most able to walk the path. But even this realm is full of distraction, desire, confusion, fleeting pleasures. You may find yourself here when you are grounded, curious, and able to respond rather than react. But even in this space, it's easy to get caught in craving and forget your deeper intention. Then there is the animal realm, where ignorance and habit dominate. Here, we are ruled by instinct, by routine, by fear of the unknown. We resist change. We hide from truth. We act from survival, not awareness. This realm can feel comforting because of its predictability, but it keeps us stuck in cycles that no longer serve us. Recognizing this realm allows you to break free from unconscious patterns. It invites you to meet fear with inquiry. The hungry ghost realm is the state of insatiable longing. Here, no matter how much you consume, attention, love, success, it's never enough. The hunger is endless, the satisfaction fleeting. You may feel this realm in moments of compulsive behavior, when you keep seeking but nothing soothes. Recognizing this realm helps you ask what the real need is underneath the craving. It helps you return to nourishment rather than feeding the void. And then there's the hell realm, filled with rage, despair, fear, and deep suffering. Everything feels hostile. The mind attacks itself. The world feels dangerous. You lash out or collapse. This is not a moral failing. It's a realm of intense pain, and when you are here, kindness is hard to access. But even this realm is temporary. Even here, the Dharma reaches. The practice in this state is not to fix or escape it, but to stay close to yourself, to breathe, to not make decisions from this space, but to wait until clarity returns. These 6 realms are not final destinations. They are fluid. You move through them all the time, sometimes all in one day, sometimes in the span of a few breaths. What matters is not avoiding them, but recognizing them. Naming where you are gives you the power to respond differently. You stop thinking something is wrong with you when you feel chaotic. You understand, this is a realm, a moment, a mood. It will pass. Using this map helps you track your mind without being consumed by it. You begin to say, the hungry ghost is speaking right now, instead of saying, I'm too needy. You say, this feels like the hell realm, instead of believing you are a broken person. You say, I'm drifting in the God realm, when you notice yourself avoiding pain by clinging to pleasure. These insights are not diagnoses, they are doorways. They invite presence, not punishment. The more you practice this way of seeing, the more compassion grows. You stop blaming yourself for your emotional states. You stop personalizing your suffering. You see it as part of being alive, as part of the cycle we all live in. And you begin to develop patience for yourself, for others. You begin to meet each realm with the right medicine. In the God realm, the medicine is humility. In the demigod realm, it's contentment. In the human realm, it's practice. In the animal realm, it's curiosity. In the hungry ghost realm, it's enoughness. In the hell realm, it's compassion, not ideas, actions. You don't think your way out of these realms, you practice your way through them. This approach also helps you relate to others with more understanding. You stop expecting people to act from their best when they're stuck in pain. You stop reacting to their reaction. You see that when someone lashes out, it may be their hell realm. When someone is greedy, it may be their hungry ghost. You offer the medicine they cannot yet offer themselves, and you remember to offer it to yourself as well. The 6 realms don't define you. They describe temporary conditions, and conditions change. The Dharma gives you the tools to influence those conditions, to shift your attention, your choices, your effort, your care. You are not trapped in any realm forever. Awareness is always available, and from awareness, freedom begins. So when you wake up overwhelmed, pause and ask, where am I today? What realm am I in? What would help me move through this gently? You're not trying to get somewhere else. You're just meeting what's real. You're becoming more honest with your internal weather. And with that honesty comes peace. Not because everything feels good, but because everything is finally allowed to be seen without shame. Let the map be a guide, not a rule. Let it teach you how to stay present without getting stuck. Let it remind you that no realm, no mood, no emotion is bigger than your capacity to return to yourself with kindness. That return is always available, even now, even here. Especially here. You've made it all the way through, not just the end of this video, but the beginning of something much deeper. You've explored Buddhist teachings not as theories, but as gentle tools to soften self-judgment, to release the grip of shame, to speak to yourself with kindness, and to hold your inner world like a friend instead of a battlefield. From learning to sit with discomfort, to letting go of the need to constantly become, from befriending your emotions to honoring your body, from seeing your flaws through the eyes of wisdom to remembering you can always begin again, you've walked a path not of perfection, but of compassion. And maybe for the first time, you've seen what Buddhism really offers. Not a set of rules to follow, but a way to return to yourself with dignity. Again and again, no matter where you've been, no matter how many times you've forgotten, every breath, every moment is a doorway back to gentleness. Now, take a deep breath. Let everything soften. Let this be your lullaby of wisdom. And when you wake, may you see yourself differently, calmer, kinder, closer to home. If any part of this journey spoke to you, let us know in the comments below. I choose gentleness. It's a small phrase, but sometimes small words open big doors. And if you'd like more content that brings wisdom and peace into your everyday life, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. There's more waiting for you here. Sleep well, friend, and may you always return to yourself with love.